I acknowledge that I am participating in this session from the lands of the Wiradjuri people. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this session. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker for today, Nicole Cook. Nicole is a Jedi scholar and and teacher in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and also does work related to human information behaviour, fake news consumption and resistance, and critical cultural information studies. Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you to Ellen for this kind conversation. Very happy to be here with you all today. Let me just get my slides up for you. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the the work that I do in misinformation and disinformation, otherwise known as fake news. And I can certainly send you any pertinent links via Ellen and Rachel. And so this particular presentation is based on an article that I published last summer in 2020 with Project Information Literacy, which is a think tank, if you will, based out of Washington State here. And they produce what they call the provocation series. They want to essentially push the envelope, see what's next in information literacy. And so had the great pleasure of working with them on this piece. So before we get started, I will also give you a land acknowledgement and honor our forebears here. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina, in the United States, southeastern United States, and these are but a few of the indigenous peoples for whom we are standing on their shoulders here in South Carolina. And I also wanted to just pass along something that I learned from Debbie Reese, who is an Indigenous scholar located in Illinois here in the States. And her feeling is that in addition to providing acknowledgments, we also need to have action, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And so just on the screen here, these are three of the resources that I share with my students when we talk about Indigenous librarianship and the importance of recognizing and incorporating Indigenous voices. So when we talk about fake news, right? Fake news is kind of the moniker that we all know, although fake news is not a new term. There are newspaper clippings and other print sources that indicate that fake news was used as early as the 1890s, but certainly it has come to wider recognition in the last couple of years. Fake news is just part of a larger umbrella or a larger phenomenon, and it can be referred to as information disorders, and I have the graphic here on the screen for you. And this is from firstdraft.org. They were another think tank or another scholarly cooperative that was really trying to parse out what was happening in 2015, 2016 and on about fake news. And so as part of this larger phenomenon, they have identified three parts to what they call the information disorder. So they identify misinformation, which I know everyone has heard and is familiar with, and it is finally making mainstream news. As opposed to just, scholars and educators and other folks trying to use the correct terminology, misinformation and disinformation have now come into their own a little bit. So misinformation, very simply put, is false information. And it could be, as simple as a typo or as simple as, giving the wrong date. So it is very much so false information, but it's not purposely false, right? There is no malintent, there is no malicious action or intent behind this misinformation. Then in the middle, we have disinformation, which is also false information, but this is deliberately created false information. So it could still be a typo or a wrong date, but maybe I'm giving you the wrong date because I don't want you to be at the webinar, or maybe I'm giving you the wrong directions because I don't want you to get, to where you need to be. Or if we're going to start being more malicious, maybe I'm not telling you who the candidates are to vote for, or maybe I'm not telling you where you should go to vote, right? We have lots of voter suppression here in the United States. So that is certainly an example of disinformation. And so, what I want to talk about a little bit today is actually malinformation. And I haven't seen as much in terms of malinformation, but certainly malinformation exists. So, think about malinformation as a really extreme form of disinformation. So, certainly it is deliberately created to deceive and mislead, but malinformation is really so much more significant in the sense that it could really cause the loss of health, liberty, even your life, right? Your livelihood, etc. So think of revenge porn, or if someone is doxxed, and by doxing I mean, their information, their private information is put online, right? So they're, in physical danger that someone could, reach them in some way and cause them harm. I read about something just last night called cyber extortion, and this was a new one for me. And this is where scammers are texting teenagers and saying, trying to essentially catfish them, try to pretend that they're interested in them romantically or sexually. And they send them a nude picture and they encourage the teenager to reciprocate and send a questionable or a very intimate picture back. And when they do, then they come through and say, if you don't send me X number of dollars or send me this amount, I'm going to tell all of your friends and your parents and your teachers, and I'm going to share this picture. And so the article that I read last night, the young man actually died by suicide because he was so terrorized by this extortion. And so this would be a really, very unfortunately, very current example of malinformation. So I just wanted to set up where I'm working in terms of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, and this idea of how do we combat dis, and malinformation? How do we critically evaluate information to, help the next teenager that's subjected to cyber extortion and give them the tools that they need to fight back and resist the harm that can come from disinformation and malinformation? So, some of the work that I had been doing was really in the work of visual literacy and, of course, with information literacy and media literacy, and thinking about the messages that we see in our media and the harm that can be done even implicitly with some of the media depictions that we see. So, this is Michael Brown, who was killed by the police in Ferguson, Missouri. And I always use this picture because there was a significant internet campaign that followed his death. When his death occurred, the media used pictures like you see on the right, and there were several other pictures that were consistently used in the media. And the idea that was coming across visually is that they wanted to make him look menacing. They wanted to implicitly imply that perhaps he deserved what happened to him. When in fact, the picture on the left that you see, he graduated from high school not 3 or 4 days before he was killed. And that picture was very, very rarely used, right? So then the campaign that followed, you can see on the picture there was a Twitter campaign, hashtag if they gun me down, was asking the media how they would choose to represent African Americans on the occasion of their death, right? Would the media choose to responsibly portray people, or would they look for pictures that were out of context, or look for images that perhaps weren't the best representation of the subject? And so I use this to get the students talking about, the bias, the inherent bias that's in media. And a lot of times students think that if it's on the internet, it has to be true. If they see it in different venues, why would it be there if it wasn't true? And we really have to dig deeper with our students, with our counterparts, with our constituents about what's the larger context. The news media does indeed have biases, and how do we analyze, how do we dig deeper and find the context and identify the implicit biases and work against these to be able to look at pictures and say, there's got to be more to this story than what's being presented to me. So similarly, these are some other examples that I give. I won't go through all of them, but in the bottom left, there is a culture of memes on the internet. There's a culture of jokes and pictures and things that are, again, very much out of context and very much rely on stereotypes. And so stereotypes are often implicit, they don't necessarily, aren't verbalized, but they are represented in the images that we see. We see celebrities and ordinary people still in brown face and black face. We have the two women in the middle of the screen. These are college graduates, very, very similar backgrounds, new moms who had their babies with them at graduation. The white woman was celebrated as, oh, she's such a responsible mother, and it's just wonderful that she's, bringing her child and sharing this wonderful moment with her child. The black woman was roundly castigated and said how ghetto and how irresponsible, and she's a teenage mom. And so we have almost identical situations. The difference is the color of their skin and the stereotypes that are inherent in some of these representations. And similarly, we have, you've heard, I'm sure, of the algorithmic bias and what happens when you put different terms in and the different results that you get. If you type in unprofessional, you'll get pictures of black women. If you type in professional, you'll get pictures of white women. And so again, none of this happens in isolation. The reason that the algorithm is biased is perhaps because the people who are coding the algorithms are biased. And I'm not even suggesting that they're explicitly biased, but they code what they know, right? We teach what we know, we research what we know, and we're not even always making cognizant decisions. We just see information and we react. Right. And so that's part of my work as information behavior specialist as well. What are the instant emotional reactions that we have to information? And sometimes that will come out and result in stereotypes. And these stereotypes are perpetuated in the images and the messages that we see online. And so just to give, even the briefest of history lessons, when we're thinking about the messages that we see, none of this is new, just like fake news isn't new. And so we see these women smiling on their way to Japanese incarceration camps during World War II. And so this is another example of disinformation. Right? It's propaganda in this case, right? This is disinformation that is purposely created to mislead and deceive, that is put out by government agencies, right? To mislead the general public. And so just to give you an example of how stereotypes persist, this was from a year or so ago while we were in the midst of COVID isolation in the middle of the pandemic. And this was right around the time when Asian hate crimes and, Asian Americans and people of Asian descent are being horribly abused and horribly attacked and injured all over stereotypes and misinformation and actually malinformation, if you will, right? Because this is causing physical harm and even death. But in this case, this is a screenshot from a menu who was advertising COVID mac and cheese instead of just saying regular mac and cheese, because they were making a clever play on words because it contained Chinese ingredients, right? So this is an example of just how subversive the stereotypes can be. I'm sure the restaurant thought that they were being clever or even funny, instead of being, racist and really offensive and perpetuating racism against those of Asian descent. So when we have these images and we have the messages coming from these images over and over and over and over, right? And we have it historically. There's something called that we call repetition theory. If we hear it enough and we hear it from enough different sources, we start to believe it. And so when we then go to search for additional information or we're talking to different sources, we tend to believe the information that matches what we already know or what we already believe. So that's confirmation bias. So we are more prone to indulge information that confirms our beliefs, our existing beliefs, information that makes us happy, information that makes us laugh, information that just doesn't make us uncomfortable, right? These are the types of things that we tend to gravitate to. On the flip side, if there is information that makes us uncomfortable, that makes us angry, that makes us fearful, or any of these negative types of emotions, that's the type of information that we are more likely to reject or avoid. And this is what starts to happen when we have things like COVID, climate change, a variety of things, including racism. If the information that we see confirms the stereotypes that we already have in our minds, we don't really have a need to question it, right? But I'm suggesting that we do have to question and that we do have to question everything and that we need to start dismantling these stereotypes and this false information, lest we get to the point, and I think in some cases we are at this point, that Dr. Anthony Fauci calls the normalization of untruths. It is so normalized now to be surrounded by misinformation and disinformation. It's easy to become overwhelmed and just say, I don't care, right? There's nothing we can do about it. But I think we can do something about it. And I think that we, as information professionals, are particularly poised to disrupt this normalization of untruths. So, just to kind of full circle and go back to the initial graphic and just talk and just kind of recap this idea that the more we're exposed to stereotypes, about different people and different groups, etc., that are negative, it can lead to malinformation, as we have seen with AAPI hate. We've seen the murder of African Americans because of their skin color. We've seen, the desecration of indigenous lands and cultures because of stereotypes and greed, right? And so the more we see this, and it is historical, it moves into the realm of malinformation, particularly when nothing is being done to disrupt. And so, again, I think that that is where we can play a significant role in the disruption of this malinformation, in addition to the disruption of misinformation and disinformation. So, I mentioned this earlier. We teach what we value. And I would also suggest that we research what we value, and we pass this on to others. And it's just part of our socialization as human beings. And we need to sometimes disrupt that socialization because all of that socialization, all of that information isn't correct. All of that information doesn't promote equity for everyone. So I just want to talk a little bit about critical cultural literacy, and I think that this is but one potential solution to this problem. And this is coming directly out of the article that I wrote, and I gave you the link, and I'll send the link during the Q&A. And so when we're talking about critical cultural literacy, really what this is aspiring to do is to explode context. And again, this idea that nothing happens in isolation. So if we are talking about misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, everything that comes out has context as part of it. And part of the reason that fake news and misdis and malinformation spread so fast and is so hard to counteract is because the references to this false information are usually without context. And by the time we figure out the context, the damage has been done, right? We rarely see media retracting false information or damaging information. And if they do, we don't often see it, right? So, again, this idea of nothing happening in isolation, but instead, things always have context. And the more context we understand, the more context that we can pass on to others. This is how we're going to hopefully break down the information disorders. So, of course, as information professionals, we are familiar with information and media literacy, and that's a lot of what we do in our reference and in our instruction services is trying to provide our constituents, our stakeholders, with accurate and quality information. But in addition to information and media literacy, we have design literacy, right? How are our interfaces created? How is our technology created, right? In addition to the algorithmic bias, there are numerous reports of different technologies not recognizing darker skin, right? And so that's a design flaw. That's part of what we need to know about design literacy. Who's being left out when technology is supposed to benefit all? We have to be knowledgeable about political literacy. I know that folks don't necessarily like, all of the politics, but when we have certain words, certain terms, certain groups of people being weaponized and used as tokens and pawns to say, they're good, but they're bad, right? We have to be aware of the politics behind that and therefore the political literacy. The historical literacy, right? Nothing, or what's the old adage? Everything old is new again, right? So again, fake news, first used in the 1890s, now in full effect in the 2020s. I showed you the picture of the Japanese incarceration camps. So that's, a much earlier instance of Asian hate, if you will. So historical literacy, we're repeating mistakes that we made decades ago. Emotional literacy, and this idea that we have socio-emotional intelligence and that we understand that other people can suffer even if we ourselves are not suffering. And so with that in mind, are we seeking equity for all? Are we seeking equity for everyone or just for ourselves, right? So that requires some emotional literacy to be able to make those connections and to essentially have empathy, if you will. Cultural literacy. I talk a lot about cultural competence in my work, and that is a very, I'll say it's a very heightened awareness of cultures that are different from your own. And in addition to that heightened awareness, it is that impetus to act, right? So if we know that another culture is so rich and robust and can just really add so much to what we're doing, that's part of cultural competence and cultural literacy. And similar to that, we have racial literacy. I know this is another one that folks can be uncomfortable with, but we have to be able to dispel the stereotypes about the differences that exist between different cultural groups. So, with this model of critical cultural literacy, this is not meant to be an exhaustive list. We know that there are dozens of different types of literacies, but what this is meant to portray in part is that all of the literacies are related and that we should not be using any of just one literacy, to address misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. We need to have everything at our disposal. We need to use all of the different literacies in tandem to have a meta literacy, if you will, to address these issues and to talk about the contextual components of the different pieces of information, the memes, the jokes, the media, etc., that we see. So I want to give two examples here to kind of walk you through this idea of critical cultural literacy as it pertains to malinformation, disinformation. So the first example of African American citizens in the US and COVID-19. When we were first learning about COVID and first going into isolation, it was actually reported on the news that African Americans could not catch COVID. Right? So we know that that is not true. Traditional literacy would automatically, and by traditional literacy, I mean traditional information literacy or traditional media literacy, would say, no, that's not true, right? We can, pull up articles and different sources that prove that African Americans are indeed contracting the COVID-19 virus. Now, critical information literacy, which is its own genre of the literature, is information literacy as we know it, but it begins to then address social inequities and it begins to address power imbalances. So if we take this same topic to critical literacy, then we learn that minority communities routinely suffer more severely from illnesses, so it stands to reason that the same would be the case with COVID-19. And now, 3 years into the pandemic, there is also plenty of information that proves that minoritized communities are more susceptible to COVID-19 because of underlying issues and illnesses. Now, if we go to critical cultural literacy in the model that I just showed you and using all of those literacies together in tandem, and we start pulling in history and we start pulling in socio-emotional intelligence, we start pulling in racial literacy, we start pulling in design literacy and all of these things, then we get to the part where we learn that minority communities have long been predisposed to underlying conditions such as hypertension and diabetes that make them more susceptible to illnesses like COVID-19. Another historical contextual fact is that there are long-term trust issues between minoritized communities and the medical community, right? So when you hear about vaccine hesitancy and other issues, there are historical reasons why people feel the way they do and why they reject the vaccine. So that's just but one example of taking a piece of disinformation, possibly malinformation that was targeted at a particular minoritized community, and walking it through traditional information literacy, critical information literacy, and then finally critical cultural literacy, which attempts to give us so much more context so that this piece of misinformation can't thrive in isolation. I'll give you a second example, also related to COVID-19. So when we all went into lockdown and we were all isolated in our homes and very unsure of what was happening, folks were sent home from work, children were sent home from school and said, oh, everyone can just learn and work from home. It's no big deal. Everyone has a computer, everyone can log on, we'll just continue and we'll carry on as normal. So we know certainly that that was untrue. So traditional information literacy would say that, perhaps remote learning can work for some, but it certainly may not work for all, right? And are we assuming that people know how to use their computers to complete their work or their schoolwork, right? So that's where we are in the traditional information literacy realm. If we move into critical information literacy, then we start talking about not all communities or families are able to work from home for various reasons, including infrastructure, right? I'm sure where you are is similar to where I am, that there are very urban settings, there are also very rural settings. There are lots of areas that don't have the physical infrastructure to accommodate Wi-Fi or internet services in the home. And we all know as information professionals that many people rely on our libraries and our institutions for their internet access, right? So the digital divide is alive and well. If we move this topic into critical cultural literacy, we know that not all communities or families are able to work at home, not only because of the infrastructure. They may not have a computer, they may only have a smartphone, right? There's lots of literature that talks about young people, school age young people, only have access to smartphones. It's very difficult to be on all of these fancy learning management systems and all of these software programs on a cell phone, right? And so there's a lack of technological capability, a lack of infrastructure, and a lack of just basic ability, to work software programs and knowledge of these software programs. And so just to put, a fine point on that particular issue, that really tiny picture at the bottom there, these are two little girls trying to do their homework, catching the Wi-Fi signal outside of a fast food restaurant. All right, so certainly remote learning was not equal for everyone during the pandemic. All right, so, and this is where, feel free to put in the chat. I can't see the chat right this second, but I will during the Q&A. These are some things that have been on the American news in the last week and a half, right? And, to continually think about this progression from traditional information literacy to critical cultural literacy, we have to do our due diligence, right? Which means we have to do a little research, which means that we have to have some uncomfortable conversations to be able to dismantle the false misinformation, or excuse me, the false information, disinformation, and malinformation that is coming across a variety of different media, right? So you may have heard that last week in Buffalo, New York, a white teenager shot 10 people because they were black in a very predominantly black neighborhood in Buffalo, New York. But in the last couple of days, there has been a conspiracy theory floating around saying that the shooter killed the 10 people because he had a toothache, and he thought that he would be able to have the toothache rectified in prison. Right, so lots of different opinions about that, but this is a variation on the theme where you hear about mass shootings being caused by mental illness, which has been debunked, right? But you have to have these conversations to kind of parse through these false headlines. Another thing that came out about this particular incident is how problematic the gaming community is. So this young man was a gamer, and some of these gaming sites start getting into the dark web where conspiracy theories, disinformation, and malinformation are just rampant, right? And again, if you hear the same things over and over and over again, you may start to believe them. Another one, this is maybe a little bit more of the absurd, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard domestic violence trial. Now, while this is not racially based, it is still malinformation because this is about domestic violence, right? And there's lots of misinformation coming out, none of it new, but coming out even more now because of this trial. And so this is an example of how entertainment, using the scare quotes, can perpetuate misinformation and disinformation. And so, these are just some of the examples that I'm working through to kind of actually just write out, in the same way that I wrote out those previous two slides. And so, just as I'm suggesting to you that this requires consistent work, it's consistent work that I have to do because we are so inundated with disinformation and malinformation. It just sometimes seems like our work will never be done. But if you care to put in the chat any thoughts that you have about these various topics, if you are aware of them, and how we can move them from traditional information literacy to critical information literacy to critical cultural literacy, I'd be happy to chat with you about that during the Q&A. And just as a side note, again, this idea that, this work is continuous, this is something that I actually learned today. In my examples, I've previously been referring to the Japanese internment during World War II. And today I learned that the appropriate word is incarceration or imprisonment, right? Because the word internment, it's a great example of how we can manipulate the truth and manipulate facts with language, and the need for us to be really precise and just be really deliberate with our language. Internment can suggest that the government would have had the right to to gather the Japanese people and keep them in isolation because perhaps they were bad actors, or that the government had a reason to do it. And essentially it's blaming the victim. Okay, but really what it was incarceration and imprisonment, and the blame should be on the government who imprisoned these people. So just as another, again, an example of how language changes, this idea that when we know better, we do better with our language and our the way that we can have conversations about difficult facts and difficult events. All right, so I just want to wrap up by reiterating things that I know you already know, but this kind of gives us our marching orders and gives us, hopefully gives us the impetus to act and continue doing this work. So mis, dis, and malinformation, and again, we are wrapping up fake news and all of that. It is endemic. All right, it is ongoing, it is historical. We happen to be, I think, in a very acute period, but it's certainly endemic. And it's expanding, right? So we have false information across multiple platforms and coming out in different forms. It's coming out in print, it's coming out orally, it's coming out visually, it's coming out in so many different ways. And it's almost like playing whack-a-mole. And as soon as you strike one thing down, something else pops up. Among the really difficult things about the false information is that it's good at provoking outrage. All right, so when I mentioned to you earlier about how people react to information that makes them feel good versus information that makes them feel bad, this is particularly where outrage comes in. And when we have these emotional reactions to information, it's harder to dispute, right? Because then it starts getting personal about what we believe and what we don't believe. As we've been talking about in our time together, false information lacks context, hence the model that we discussed. And false information is still hindered by good intentions. And let me tell you what I mean by that. We still have people sharing false information who literally don't know better, right? There is no malintent, but they just want to share. They believe what they believe, and they continue to share false information. They continue to perpetuate stereotypes, etc. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword in the sense that, we're trying to combat false information against the known bad actors, but we still have to address a lot of good people who are just perhaps naive or easily misled, whatever we want to call that. So that is just part of what we have to contend with when we deal with false information. So, with that said, this is kind of my call to action to you. In order to combat this false information, we need to be advocates. And I don't even mean allies. We need to be, I think, stronger than allies. We need to be advocates, accomplices who are empathetic, right? Again, this idea that we can have empathy for someone going through something that honestly doesn't impact us. But in order for all of us to be happy and have equity, that we know that everyone has to have equity, right? So that's part of this idea of being empathetic. We have to be curious. We have to want to know things that we don't know. We have to want to do better than what we're currently doing. And by that, I mean, we can all be very comfortable, and we don't have to do anything that would make us uncomfortable. But in certain cases, maybe we do need to be curious and want to come out of our own comfort zones in order to make things better for another group or another region, etc. And that often requires us to be nimble, right? Maybe we have to look at different sources. Maybe we have to change how we do our reference or instruction or other services because we know that we have to try new things to reach different people. All right, so that's kind of what I mean by nimble. We also have to be proactive, right? And we have to keep putting out the information, and we have to keep trying to teach people how to evaluate information critically, even though, sometimes they're like, yeah, we don't want to do that. That doesn't work. So we have to keep trying, right? So we have to keep being proactive. We have to be humble. And by humble, I mean we have to have intellectual humility. We have to have cultural humility. So by intellectual humility, I mean simply that we all recognize that there are things that we don't know, right? And we have to do work to learn about those things that we don't already know. And similarly, with cultural humility, we may not know much about cultures that we don't personally participate in. And so, how do we learn more? How do we become culturally competent in other cultures so we can, highlight and incorporate all voices and all perspectives and all experiences? And all of these things require us to do our due diligence, right? So, there's a technique for misinformation and disinformation called triangulation. And, it's very easy to tell folks for fake news, don't believe something that you've only seen once. And if we're going to triangulate, have you seen it in 3 different places? Right? So that's a very simple example of doing due diligence, right? And this idea of questioning everything and not just believing any piece of information that we hear at any given time. And then finally, all of this kind of works towards what I've been mentioning all along, this idea of working towards equity for all. And, that's part of this idea of disputing false information so everyone can benefit and not be harmed by, the disinformation and malinformation that is just really, really rampant. All right, so I will end with this. I was actually updated this today for you. Dr. Anthony Fauci was the commencement speaker at Princeton University in New Jersey, and he was talking a lot about some of the things that we've just discussed this evening. And he told the students, the graduating students, it is our collective responsibility not to shrug our shoulders and sink into tacit acceptance of the normalization of untruths. Because if we do, lies become dominant and reality is distorted. So again, it can be hard, it can be frustrating, but we have to continue to fight against this normalization of untruths. So, with that said, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to thank you so much for your time and attention today. It is wonderful to be here with you, and I think we have some time for questions.
We do. Thank you, Nicole. That was fascinating, and I know it gave us a lot to think about. So, and I agree with you that as information professionals and librarians, we are really in the perfect position to be advocates and turn things around. So, I'll just have a look in the chat and see if there were any questions. I know there were a few comments.
Yeah, I'm reading as you are reading, and I just popped the link to the article in there. I know it's a lot to take in, but the article goes into a little bit more depth, and just wanted to provide that information to you.
Wonderful. If anyone has any questions, if they'd like to pop them in the chat.
So I'm just reading the one comment. We have had malinformation about how the country was colonized. Absolutely. We have used the word settlers instead of colonists. Yes. We have ignored the wars of resistance, and only now is the discourse changing somewhat, but there is a lot of resistance from some historians and those with white Anglo heritage. 100%. 100%. And so when we talk about decolonizing, that there's so much pushback, and folks kind of getting in their feelings about how could you say that, and really just having those hard conversations about what this comes down to is who matters, right? Whose history matters, whose experience matters, and to this wonderful point, we have to be looking beyond white Anglo-Saxon viewpoints, because that's how we've been socialized. So we need to break past that socialization and think about the experiences and the cultures and the information that has been previously excluded. So thank you for that. And I think it's another great example of how to be more precise in the language that we're using as well. Okay, so I'm reading from Hester. There's a lot of discussion around Facebook's involvement in dismiss malinformation in the 2016 US presidential election. Yes, there was. They are still, they're still not owning up to that. Okay, as library professionals, what kind of oversight, borrow education should we be thinking about when it comes to providing news databases to borrowers? What level of responsibility falls on us as an institution that can provide access to news sources? No, it's a great question. And I think that we do bear the onus of having and I use the word quality information, and I know that sometimes people say, well, what's quality? And we have to think about folks that have the varying opinions. And just for example, Fox News. Folks have very distinct feelings about Fox News, and they'll say, well, if you have Fox News versus a liberal station or resource, and it's like, well, you have to again think about the triangulation. Are you hearing the same information from multiple places? So that's part of what we have to think about, and how we have to address people who think differently and believe differently than we do. But I do think that we have to use our skills as information professionals to vet the sources that we're using. And again, with the being proactive, being ready, willing, and able to have conversations with someone who might say, I don't want to use Newsbank because it's biased. And why do you think it's biased? Okay, what would you like to use instead? Right? So we can still use some of the same strategies and techniques about how to access and evaluate information, even if they're using sources that we might not subscribe to. And I think part of this is also about libraries and organizations having us do a better job about sharing our value with the public, right? I think, when the fake news around the 2016 presidential election came through, I think that was a big part of the battle that we had in terms of addressing this brand new crisis, but also getting our constituents and our communities to say, hey, the library is actually an expert in misinformation, right? They're coming to us for books, they're coming to us for story time and all of the other great services that we provide, but they might not have been thinking about us explicitly in misinformation and disinformation. They think of us as information providers, but perhaps not experts in this dimension. So, how do we get them to know that we are the experts in this area and that we are trustworthy resources? And I think that's, part of that discussion. And then if they believe that we are, experts and reliable, trusted resources, it's probably then easier to get them to use Newsbank and Press Reader and some of the things that we rely on because we, have vetted them and we have used them for extensive periods of time.
Yeah. Wonderful. Nicole, I did have a question. I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the website you created, the Anti-Racism Resources for All Ages, because it really is a fantastic resource. And and maybe a bit about the difference between being non-racist and anti-racist. And I know you kind of touched on it a little bit before with the acknowledgement of country about being more active.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So, and I didn't even have that in the PowerPoint. So thank you for bringing that up. So that came about literally maybe a week after George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, here in the States, and it was just it was part me being librarian. It was part me trying to kind of reconcile of what it meant at that particular moment in time to be Black in the United States, and really feeling fear and feeling all of the emotions, and being in mourning about seeing this man murdered on film, right? And then on the flip side of that, I have never seen, and I've been in the profession about 25 years now in different capacities, and I've never seen so many book lists just come through. And it was overwhelming, right? And even for someone who does this for a living, I was overwhelmed by the amount of information that was coming through. So it was just really a way to kind of parse through some of the things that were coming through the various book lists. So as of now, and I haven't updated it in a while, the site had over 200 different lists and different sites that were recommending resources on anti-racism. And I just put it out there as a resource, right? So I know, when traumatic things like this happen, sometimes people want to ignore everything, but there are others like me who just dig for information and dig for information to try and make sense. So that's really, what that site was about. And so, like you mentioned, the non-racist versus anti-racism. So the non-racism is you may not personally be racist, or you may personally not subscribe to different stereotypes or different false information about other groups, and that's great, right? But how does that help the people that are being subjected to the colonists, to the racism, to the stereotypes? And so that's where the anti-racism comes in, because anti-racism is asking you to be proactive. It's challenging you to act, right? So if you've and I had to write a companion piece for the site, because what was happening was people were looking for books, they were reading all of the bestsellers on how to be anti-racist, etc., and then they weren't doing anything with that information, right? So it was contributing to the non-racism, but their new knowledge was then not contributing to anti-racism. What are you doing with that information? How are you using that information to then benefit others, right? So it really is a distinction of action.
Yeah, great. We've also been doing a few workshops recently around diverse picture books, and I noticed that you have done some extensive research in that area with your project, Something Beautiful: Social Justice, Empathy, and Cultural Competence in Children's Books. Just curious about some of the findings that came from that, if you could share. with the group.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, that's always an ongoing project. And it really does coincide with a lot of what we're seeing now with the significant uptick in banned and challenged books.
Yeah.
A lot of the books that are banned and challenged have marginalized authors or illustrators, but more so focus on marginalized characters.
Mhm.
And so, what happens when these particular books are banned or challenged, whether it be brown, black, indigenous, people of color represented in the books. A lot of the books that focus on the LGBTQIA plus community are being banned. And these books are so important because people in the various communities can see themselves in the community, in the books, and feel like they're validated and they feel like they matter. And so those are really the findings of that project, to really piggyback on Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, who talked about books being windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors, and being mirrors where you can see yourself in a book. Windows, you can see others and learn about other people, right? The empathy and things of that nature. And the sliding glass doors, where you can actually have an experience of another culture, etc. So when the books are banned or challenged, all of those opportunities are removed, right? And that's part of what we're going through. And to the earlier comment, about colonization and things of that nature, that's part of what this is, right? This erasure and this saying that these stories aren't fit, and if I don't want to see them, then no one should see them, so we should just eliminate them. Really significant impacts. And so, yeah, thank you for that reminder. We need to revisit that project, and try and use some of that information to fight back against the bans and the challenges.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Nicole. If there weren't any more questions, don't think there are. No, we'll just say thank you very much for your time today. That was a brilliant presentation, and yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thank you. It is a pleasure. It's always wonderful to have people acknowledge your work, and maybe in a non-COVID world, I can actually come visit you all and we can chat
Yes,
further.
I
But
would love
it,
that.
yeah, it's been an honor, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay. I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Nick Tanzi, who is the Assistant Director of the South Huntington Public Library in New York, a nationally recognised library technology consultant and author. Today, he'll be leading us through an exploration of trends, predictions, and tech innovations as we gaze into the future of libraries. Welcome, Nick.
Okay, you can hear me okay? Audio's good? Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. Let me pull up my slides and we'll jump right in. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the possibilities and perils of our changing tech landscape. I think in part because we know that COVID is the elephant in the room, but it feels like we've all thrown out those 5-year plans. There's a certain acceleration of tech trends that, we've been planning for and we've seen coming, but certainly not at this pace. And so today I'll be talking about some things that are familiar, some things that maybe aren't so familiar as we go into emerging technologies, and then want to highlight some really kind of innovative things that are happening that are kind of engaging these different emerging technologies. So very quickly, I've worked in libraries now for a little over 20 years. I'm in New York. I've always lived and worked here. My library is a South Huntington Public Library, and that's one of the things that's informing my perspective. We are about 1 hour east of New York City on a good traffic day. On a bad traffic day, it's about 3 weeks. And we serve a population of 33,500 people. And within the public library system in the United States, we're actually a very library-rich environment. I know you're fans of the metric system. In the United States, we use hamburgers as a unit of measurement. And with that in mind, we have about 14,000 McDonald's and we have 16,500 libraries, give or take. And New York in particular is a very library-rich environment, in part because the state constitution actually mandates library service. So just in the state, 755 public libraries with 1,100 outlets. And so with all that concentration of different libraries and geographically spread out in very different areas, you see a lot of innovation. You see a lot of really different ways of dealing with problems. And so I hope that that wide kind of perspective really helps kind of inform some of the things we see today. First thing I want to talk about is virtualization of services. And certainly we've all lived the last 2.5 years. I think we've all experienced this, but a sense of what's happened and where we're headed, certainly the current state. And what I find fascinating is we've all dove into virtual programs, but there's a lot of unintended consequences. And in this case, a lot of them are positive. We, I think, pivoted to virtual programs in part to have continuity of service, right? We were shutting our physical branches down. We were practicing social distancing. And so we wanted to continue serving our public. Somewhat ironically, virtual programs have actually discovered new audiences, have engaged with folks that maybe weren't those power users we initially were trying to serve. Folks maybe with mobility issues, homebound, folks who just the hours we offered programs didn't work for them. Beyond that, we've discovered new partnerships. We've been able to engage in a lot of ad hoc, kind of out of network collaborations, not necessarily our typical consortium, which has allowed us to choose niche programming that maybe at my own individual library, I could only have 5 or 7 people that might be interested, but I get a couple of fellow libraries together and suddenly we have an effective, cost-effective audience that we can pitch to. So that's also really found new audiences that were perhaps too niche for us to serve adequately. With that, there's a new emphasis on digital equity. Every now and then we discover that, hey, what do you know? Not everybody has a strong internet connection. And digital equity is very much about, the sense of being able to fully participate in society, right? To have enough of a broadband connection. And that means something very different when everybody's at home and everybody's working from home and everything's a streaming service now, and your child's going to school remotely. And so even as we try to engage folks with virtual programming, we discovered the need to really focus on digital equity. That's meant expanding our Wi-Fi footprint, going outside, expanding hours of operation, trying to fill in the gap, right, with hotspot lending. And then with the understanding that folks are working from home, and sometimes from home means they're Zooming from the library, reconfiguring our physical spaces, which means, perhaps making quiet studies that were underutilized become Zoom rooms, soundproofing. It also means for some of our libraries, we're now moving towards not just renting or, allowing patrons to book our spaces, our physical spaces, but actually our virtual spaces. We're now seeing the rise of Zoom room lending. Those pro accounts, you can get temporary access to actually borrow a virtual meeting room, which is helpful because sometimes, a free Zoom account isn't enough to get the job done depending on what folks are doing. And then of course, equipment lending, having the necessary hardware, webcams and all that, so folks can engage, can go to job interviews remotely, can do all those things that maybe they don't have at home. One of the new trends, though, that we've seen in relation to kind of the new Zoom landscape is the rise of telehealth in libraries. Now, a lot of us have been unwilling participants in just public health, right, in the last 2 years. But what we've seen also is the same individuals at home that maybe have issues of digital equity, that don't have a strong bandwidth, Oftentimes, this is rural communities that also don't have access to hospitals, that oftentimes, if they want to engage in telehealth, are unable to. So libraries are kind of interesting partners because we have the IT infrastructure generally to support Zoom. Libraries have a commitment to privacy that I think needs to coincide with healthcare. And then we often can repurpose spaces, meeting space, old reference space, to be able to have these kind of telehealth solutions. And what we've seen, I want to draw attention to three particular, very different looks here. In one case, we have the Pottsboro Area Library. This is in Texas. This is a rural community. And what they've actually done is they have a partnership with a healthcare facility, and they help manage chronic conditions and perform health screenings. So it's the telehealth aspect, but also doing regular health screenings for, things like diabetes and hypertension. So that's a very active partnership. And that library in particular has purpose-built rooms where there's separate entrances. Then we've seen more of a remote option. For example, New Jersey has new NJ Health Connect at your library. They are disseminating iPads, and these are remotely managed, but have telemedicine apps on them. And this is a very diverse community, generally speaking, in New Jersey. And so it's multilingual health information. And then finally, Get Connected DE, or Delaware, the state of Delaware, they both lend devices via a kiosk. And these are a lot of different remote services. They're actually, in addition to telehealth, there's career counseling. And these devices are basically standalone, or they can be used in conjunction with a reservable private space. And one of the things with telehealth too is because it's such a personal thing, sometimes even the patron who has the, bandwidth at home to conceivably engage in a telehealth visit doesn't have the privacy that they need. And so being able to say, I'm going to the library is a less threatening way of, pursuing telehealth visits. So as we see the virtualization, we also see this new kind of intermingling of telehealth with the library, which in many ways can be a natural partnership. Despite some of the recent angst, with book banning and, folks maybe acting aggressively towards the libraries still remain, according to Pew Research, one of the more trusted organizations, despite a general distrust of authority and government that we're seeing. Even as we virtualize, right? Even as our programs, we offer them online and streaming, even as we attempt to accommodate the new Zoom users, this is a real strain on infrastructure. Back in the day, it was the person who was downloading cat pictures was the one that was slowing your internet, right? And then eventually it was the person that was playing cat videos or the person downloading music, early Napster adopters. Those were the things that used to slow down your bandwidth. Now it's Zoom, it's streaming, it's quite a drain on bandwidth, and we need to invest. The other thing is virtual programs, they happen, but that's a lot of, videotaping and editing, and these files are really data intensive. They're gigabytes and gigabytes. And I don't know that we've yet figured out where we're storing this stuff. Is it cloud-based? Because we dove in so quickly, because we pivoted, maybe we leapt before we looked, so to speak. And along those lines, there's real legal concerns. The traditional library performer, we have kind of boilerplate contracts. And I don't know that libraries necessarily have thought out the implication of virtual programs. It's very different when they exist in perpetuity and you're putting them up on social media. So we need to really make sure that we firm up these contracts, that we understand who owns things when it comes to intellectual property. Sometimes we're videotaping performances. I have privacy concerns, I think, particularly as we move towards hybrid programming. I might be totally comfortable personally going to a yoga class in person. I'm not terribly comfortable if you're videotaping me doing downward dog, right? And then putting it on Facebook or YouTube. And so we need to think about what's the best fit for these things and make sure that we're respecting people's privacy as we move towards hybrid programming. And early on, a lot of libraries really used social media as a program platform, in part because it's what we already had, we already invested in. Long-term, social media really it's an advertising platform. It's not really great as a program platform, and hopefully we begin to pivot away from that. And the other thing, and you can say this for a lot of things that have gone digital for us, is an issue of resource allocation, right? We have two very different patron types, more than two, but speaking broadly, you have those folks who like virtual programming, you have those folks who like in-person, and you're trying to serve both customers. And I don't know that our budgets have doubled, right? Same can be said when we look at digital collections. So this is a really tricky time as we figure out what the new normal is, and we determine how to allocate funding. I want to talk a little bit about digital collections, but here's where you'll see emerging technologies, and in particular AI, begins to kind of infiltrate those day-to-day things that libraries do. We have seen a real digital collection roller coaster. Again, driven by the pandemic, 2020 saw a 40% increase in ebooks, and that's to be understood. For us, our library was closed as of March 2020, about mid-March, until after the 4th of July. And even then, visits kind of slowly came back. We've also had real supply chain issues getting print materials. So it's no surprise that we've seen a lot of ebook circulation. However, into 2021, it's more of a plateau. Now, we're still seeing growth, but we're not seeing explosive growth. And that's to be understood. We've kind of absorbed these new users. We've allocated resources. That said, it's not as simple as up and then plateaued. Audiobooks, and e-audiobooks in particular, are extremely tied to commuter traffic. If for all my audiobook listeners, typically you're listening to it because you're on a run or you're driving somewhere. And so when folks stopped driving because their job was closed or they were working off site, audiobooks slowed. Now growth was still good. And this is these statistics are according to Overdrive. So slow is still 20% growth. As of 2021, though, it's picked right back up, 35–40% growth in audiobooks. And again, as commuter traffic picks up, you can expect that to rise. We've also, though, when you talk about putting a strain on collections, we've put a lot of emphasis on other streaming media, on things like Canopy and Hoopla, streaming music, streaming videos. And we have to absorb that new interest. And in particular, Canopy can be an expensive service. Now, Overdrive has acquired Canopy, so you'll have to take a wait and see attitude. What does that mean? I like Overdrive. I don't like media centralization, so we'll have to see. Now, here's where we start seeing how AI kind of bleeds into our digital collections. Smart speakers and voice assistants. You need to think of those things as machine learning. That's AI. We often don't think of them as AI. We think of AI as the robot, right? That's going to replace us all. But smart speakers, voice assistants, that is machine learning. Now, I'm going to give you some kind of US-centric stats, but I don't think they're unique to the United States. And that's to say that we've seen a real growth in home ownership of smart speakers. About 1 in 4 American households now has a smart speaker. That's your Alexa, your Amazon Echo, your Google Home. And about 1 in 3 Americans is now using voice-activated searches, Siri and the like, on a daily basis. And that's interesting because that's giving rise to something called screenless web browsing. If we think about how we got on the internet 10 years ago, it was a desktop computer. More recently, as of 2016, More people get on the internet with an iPad, with a mobile device, a smartphone. Now we're seeing about 1/3 of people that are using voice searches daily. That's still internet browsing. It's just, Google or Amazon is crawling a web page and looking for information, right, at your behest. That's screenless web browsing. People are engaging with the internet with voice commands, and that's going to be something that informs, how we display information going forward. We're not there yet. We have to make these changes, but at least from a service standpoint, from a collection standpoint, that means integrating content. And we've seen that with things like Hoopla that now have voice activation, that interface with Amazon's Echo. It also means that we inform patrons as we train patrons in the same way that when somebody comes in with an e-reader, we tell them that the library lends ebooks. As your patrons, increasingly, you're trying to figure out how these voice assistants work and how a smart speaker works. We need to make sure that we're aware of how our content integrates and pitch it out there, be aggressive salespeople. And, this machine learning is also powering AI captioning, AI-powered captioning rather, which is extremely important from a virtual program standpoint. There's free options. Google Chrome now has a live caption plugin. So that's something that can really help augment our virtual programs. And as we'll see, captioning has come a long way as we look at augmented reality in particular. So that's kind of the current state when it comes to digital collections and AI, but other things are coming. And again, Overdrive is one of those beasts when it comes to digital collections and libraries, right? They are very much invested in AI collection development tools. They have a console they're working on called Retelligence. And it's AI powered, and it can do things like determine Lexile scores. It has content awareness. It understands words and images, voices, but also tone and emotion. And, that's something where it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. From an accessibility standpoint, it's great, and from a content development perspective, I can easily use it to perform something like a diversity audit and make sure that my collection is representative of the community I serve. Conversely, that same technology can be used to suppress those voices, to micro-target things I don't like, right? And so technology is neither good nor evil. It's kind of depends on how it's wielded. And so that's something we need to be aware of. It can be weaponized at the same time that it can do great things. AI narration is another thing that is both good and bad. We know Findaway, it's a big audiobook company, was acquired by Spotify. And Spotify is very big on AI narration. We all have our favorite voice actors, right? Well, there's a couple things going on. Not every book gets narrated. Not every book has a big enough audience to get narrated, and narration is expensive. Good AI can narrate a book, which from an accessibility standpoint is great if I'm vision impaired. So in that way, it can be a good thing. Bad thing, well, we all have our favorite authors. And now some authors, AI can study them and replicate their voice, and it can pay them royalties and do all those things. But it tends to be a winnowing where the rich get richer, but it's a very tough job market for other people. So if you are a narrator, you should be very nervous about this type of technology. The other thing is AI-powered voice assistance is coming to library collections and services. I'm going to very quickly play a little video. Let me know if you get audio, because I don't know that when I shared, basically somebody jump in and yell at me if you don't get audio when I play this video.
There isn't any audio, Nick, sorry.
That's okay. So let me try a new share. I'm going to quick end the share and then jump into a new one.
No worries.
So let us share screen. Oh, there we go. I did not optimized. Shame on me. Okay, let me know if we get a better result.
Hey Google, talk to Libby.
Hi there. You can get a book recommendation or look for a book. What'll it be today?
Look for a book.
What book would you like to find?
Sophia of Silicon Valley.
Let's take a look. Do you mean Sophia of Silicon Valley by Anna Yen?
Yep.
You can borrow the ebook or audiobook or read its description. What would you like to do?
Borrow it, please.
The ebook and audiobook are both available to borrow. Which one would you like?
The ebook.
Done. The ebook, Sophia of Silicon Valley, is checked out to you from Cuyahoga County Public Library.
So we'll stop there, but you see there, right? And you did get audio, I'm assuming. So that's where voice integration is really coming in, where, folks have these devices, they're increasingly becoming common in the household. Library collections need to interface when, as people kind of engage in the screenless web browsing. It's the new way to consume content. It's the new way to basically access online resources. So moving more into kind of emerging technologies now, we're going to look at augmented and virtual reality. And just quick explainer, when we look at augmented reality or AR, think of virtual overlaid on reality. If I hold up my camera and I put on a Snapchat filter, it's me, the cat ears are not me. That's the virtual overlaid on reality. Fully immersive, put on the headset and I'm in a VR environment where everything is artificial. And XR's extended reality is occasionally used as a catch-all. It's a little more complicated than that, but for our purposes today, going to look at AR and VR and kind of their place in the library and some interesting places they're going. So looking first at augmented reality. Current state, what you need to understand is AR was the equipment that was holding it back. Not everybody has an AR headset. As of 2016, 2017, your smartphones became a basically put out a developer's tool known as ARKit and AR Core, Apple and Android, where now about 2 billion smartphones became an AR capable device. So that's why AR is really exploding and turning into this everyday AR, where you can use it as a measurement tool, you can use it as shopping. If I go to Zenny and I'm shopping for glasses, I can see the glasses overlaid on my face. That's really one of the things that's driven it. So now it is moving into fields like education, services like CoSpaces EDU, or basically child-friendly ways to develop augmented reality experiences on a desktop and then experience them on a mobile device or a headset. But where it's also making inroads is it's impacting the way we find and retrieve information. And that's kind of encapsulated by Google. Think about Google Lens, which is their motto is search what you see. And so I can perform visual searches now. I can view text and OCR through my phone can then translate that text, right? That's modern Google Translate. I can view a plant through my phone and it can identify the plant. So that's kind of that search what you see. It's being able to view a shirt that I like and then getting an AR pop-up, an overlay that shows me where to purchase that shirt. The other thing is Google now can present results in augmented reality, a more media-rich way of viewing a result. So imagine I find myself getting too much sleep. So I need to discover some new nightmare fuel to keep me awake at night. So what do? Go on my smartphone and my Google app, and I search for the anglerfish, which is a horrifying monster that lives thousands of feet below the sea, and it basically is plotting against us all the time. And so I performed that search, which you can see on the left here. And now I have the option from Google, because my device is AR capable, my smartphone, to view it in AR, in 3D. And so this is my phone here on the right in landscape mode. And what do you know? I can actually see an anglerfish in my office. That's one of those ways where this can be much more media rich when you're looking at diagrams, when you're getting results. You know, we're all different learners, and many of us are visual learners. So the searching is becoming different. It's becoming more visual. It's becoming more linked with augmented reality. And the results themselves are being presented now as a more media rich augmented reality kind of flavored result. Don't need to see that again. And so many of our libraries now are engaging in things like augmented reality kits. Because these things are smartphone powered, it's very easy to take a $35 merge headset, and now you can have a fully immersive experience. You can actually have an AR headset for very cheap. Things like Emerge Cube here on the left. This is a kind of a QR code or a holograph I can hold in my hand, and I can append things like a 3D file that I designed and actually hold it and manipulate it in my hand. I can have games and information presented on that. You'll see here, that is my Merge Cube. I'm viewing it through my phone, and it's giving me an augmented reality experience I can actually touch. And so augmented reality kits are a way that libraries can kind of flavor or show folks the possibilities of augmented reality in a way that's inexpensive. Now that the phone doesn't present such a barrier as, for example, you know, a augmented reality headset that can cost $3,000, right? A Microsoft HoloLens, for example. So when cost comes down, accessibility tends to go up. The other thing is, even past generation phones, rather than turn them in, they can be repurposed to serve as an AR tool, an AR-ready device. So now I want to show you where this is all going. And this to me is fascinating. I think it's going to get the gears turning. I'm going to hit play again, same caveat. If for some reason you don't get sound, but I'm assuming we're good now, please let me know. So absent any shouting, I'm going to assume we're good.
My mother speaks Mandarin, and I speak English, which is a strange thing.
他讲英文我可以听得懂，可是有时候我讲不来嘛。
We'd love to be able to share with you a new prototype we've been working on. You should be seeing what I'm saying, just transcribed for you in real time, kind of like subtitles for the world.
What we're working on is technology that enables us to break down language barriers, taking years of research in Google Translate and bringing that to classes.
You see me? Oh, sí, sí te veo.
I'm actually looking straight into your eyes, and it seems like you're looking right at me.
Oh, sí, sí, estoy viendo lo que estás diciendo para ayudarte.
Making access to information just instant and intuitive. By doing that, technology fades into the background, and we're more connected with the people and the things around us. Giving people the gift of communicating with anyone, no matter what language they speak, I think is a really powerful thing.
Que tengo que dialogar con muchas personas que solamente hablan inglés. Como magia para mí, porque voy a ver cosas que voy a entender lo que ellos dicen por completo y...
Yes, 也可以互相沟通。我爱你。
Okay, so, you know, on a few instances, I've talked about how technology can really be used to improve accessibility. And no doubt you're already thinking about just how you would love to have 1, 2 pairs of these glasses at every single service desk. Particularly 2 pairs, because that means both the librarian or library staff and the person that is, your patron and you're engaging with can both speak in their chosen language, and each person can perfectly understand each other by reading the captions, right? Separately, the fact that it can pick up things like a sign language, all of a sudden make it an incredible accessibility tool that you could provide in a program. So these technologies have been being developed for some time. We know that Google and others are getting much better at captioning, at understanding languages. We've seen how well they do OCR. We know now wearable tech is coming, and all of these things, along with machine learning, all kind of converge into one pair of glasses that is an incredible accessibility tool. That really is what technology is supposed to be. It's supposed to make things easier. It's not supposed to be a layer of stuff. It's just supposed to be intuitive. And so to me, this strikes me as one of those things that is wow. And this is not far off. They debuted this. It's coming. It's not coming right away, but it's getting close. So that was augmented reality. Now, virtual reality, we actually see some libraries in the United States doing some pretty innovative stuff. For starters, the current state, in the same way that we saw that augmented reality, once it went mobile, really became more affordable. With virtual reality, it's this concept of the all-in-one device, right? That headset that you can just wear, like the Oculus Quest, the Oculus Go, as opposed to the one that has to plug into a machine. It's just giant bridal train of technology that costs several $1,000s when you include the computer cost. Couple $100s, which gets us much closer to device lending. And indeed, we see some libraries lending devices. In particular, when the Oculus Go came out and was affordable, it was about $100, $150. In my library, it's a way to engage with the collection. We can now curate experiences and engage in what I call a next level book display. I'll give you an example. We had the anniversary of the moon landing a few years ago. Was the big one. It was like 50 years. And what we did was, sure, we had materials on display, but we also had a VR headset with an actual experience that was meant to replicate the lunar module landing on the surface of the moon. So that's, VR is just another way to convey information. Information happens in print, it's moved online, and now it's moved into this immersive experience. And so it kind of plays into just another way to impart information. So that was actually a book display, had classic materials, movies, video, movies and books. And then also, hey, do you want to check this VR experience out? Come by the desk. It's also a way to engage with library spaces. In this land of remote service, we were able to offer virtual tours. You can take 360 photos and video, which very quickly with a VR headset becomes an immersive experience. On the right here, these are just screen grabs. We're actually going to dive into a VR tour of my library, just so you can kind of see how this works. But virtual reality, again, is a new way to present information. I think it may be the future of local history, to be able to take 3D captures of events, community events, and then be able to relive them in VR is pretty incredible potential as well. So I'm going to take you on a tour of the South Huntington Public Library. And again, this may necessitate a separate share. I'm going to click on this and you let me know if we're standing in my building. Nope, it says it paused it. So I'm going to do as a new share. Let's do this. Okay, we're looking in my library's building right now, I hope. Rachel, if you want to give a shout.
Yes, we are. We can see that.
Okay, so right now, welcome to the South Huntington Public Library. This is the way you came in. This is the way ahead. I will try not to run around too much and get everyone disoriented. But this is based on a 360 camera, took hundreds of photographs of her building, which is a 47,000 square foot facility. And now it has two-dimensional overlays. So if you need to find the restroom, here it is. Answer those common questions, right? And now I'm going to walk through. We talked about that moon landing there. Here we are. And now you are in the reference area of the library. To give you a sense of how good the scan is, we can read covers if we wanted to. I'm going to back. I'll do a very quick tour. This is our tech center, kind of our digital media lab. Here we are. And then I will just jump to an outdoor space. Let me go to a quick dollhouse view. And now we're outdoors. Now I will do a new share. Let me just get out of that. Okay, and now we're back in this case study screen, right?
Yes, we are. Yep.
Okay. All right. I always get nervous when I jump in VR off the on a Zoom call. So you can tell that that was a way for us to, obviously do a virtual tour, which became super effective because we would actually have, for example, the school district couldn't visit for a while. They kind of put the kibosh on that at the peak of COVID. And so we were able to actually give educators tours of the building over Zoom, narrate it in real time, or it could be user directed. Folks could just take a tour of the library facility, plan their visit. So that was an incredible engagement tool made possible by VR. Here, what you'll see is this is Clayton County Library. This is in Georgia. This area is a little economically depressed, and they are the first, at least in the United States, that is using VR to provide job training to patrons, get them certified in things like HVAC and things like solar panel installation.
A new innovative training program in Clayton County working to help people build their careers and boost their salaries. The training is especially important in a community where 2020 census data shows the average household income is about $47,000 a year. 11 Alive's Latasha Givens joining us live now inside the Jonesboro Library where the free training is being offered. Hi there, Latasha.
Good evening, Sheba. Yes, I'm live inside the library, inside the virtual training center. And this is where residents can come and learn everything from HVAC to plumbing to solar panel installation. And get this, not only can you make a good living wage with these careers, in Georgia, they're also stable even during a recession.
We want to get them into the workforce and doing something that they can actually do to make a living wage.
Roslyn Lett is the director of the Clayton County Library System and says opportunity is key. The library is now offering virtual reality trades training in areas like HVAC, solar panel installation, facilities maintenance, plumbing, electrical work, and appliance repair.
To be a plumber, to be an
So just a little taste there, but again, you want to talk about libraries are often in the position of helping patrons navigate economic crisis, helping with resumes, helping people get trained up, but think about actually being able to help facilitate getting certified in really well-paying jobs. I think that's an incredible value to be able to deliver to a community. Another really interesting way VR is being adopted in libraries. This particular project is called VRtality. And what that is it's based on creating a VR experience. So they work with teenagers to create VR experiences that are therapeutic, that are relaxing, that help deal with mental health. And then those experiences are actually published for others to engage with. So it's a bit of a ripple effect. That's based on a partnership between IMLS, that's the Institute of Museum and Library Services. It's a federal agency in the United States. And public libraries like, was it Seattle Public was involved in this, Fayette Library, Washington, or DC rather, Library, and the University of Washington. What I like about this, and I'll play this rather briefly, this is just a briefest clip of a game that was published. It's a gardening game. Again, this is teen created. So you've got nice weather, you've got bird songs, you've got bubbles, gardening. It seems like a great day, right? What's neat about this is, if this is of interest, this is a customizable program. That link, virtuality.org, they actually have a whole toolkit. They have a whole process to replicating the program. So it's pretty neat. And, you know, it's, we know, especially of, you know, with the pandemic, mental health has kind of taken a beating. And so VR is really a way to hopefully, in some cases, to battle mental health crisis, to work with at-risk populations in a way that I think is really neat, particularly because it has a ripple effect. Teens work, they learn how to design in Unity engine. They make a VR experience that's personally therapeutic. The act of creation helps them. And then they're able to share this with others and engage others with it. I'm going to very briefly show you two other technologies that we often don't associate with, or at least this one we don't associate often with the libraries, which is drones. Now, drones are an emerging technology that's popping up everywhere. Libraries are engaging with it with programming, teaching aerial photography or drone photography, how to pilot. It's an industry that here is heavily regulated, which actually plays into libraries because it's local jurisdictions, it's federal jurisdictions, there's a lot of rules, and we can offer authoritative hyper-local information to help folks navigate. So it's kind of in our wheelhouse. Libraries use these things personally, not just for fun, although yes, we use them for promotional videos. We've all seen those aerial shots, and oftentimes we do use them outdoors at festivals, but we also use them indoors. They can actually map a indoor facility in a really neat way. The other piece is we use them for facility management. We have a flat roof on a multi-story building that can be difficult to get to, and occasionally the drains do back up on the facility. We can send our custodians up, which is dangerous, right? It's icy, there's a ladder, it's got all the makings of a horror movie. Or they can fly the drone up and check the drains. So facility management perspective, it's great. Very briefly, this is a library branch in Midtown, New York City, that used a drone indoors with a professional actually to videotape kind of an overview of the building. So of course they had to show off and fly in between books and the stacks, but it shows you the kind of control these things have now, and how you can make these really interesting, perspective videos and promotional videos. When you change the perspective, it tends to draw the eye a little more than if we were just running around with our phone. Oop, went too far. Now, I want to show you what's coming around the corner. We actually had a library in Virginia. In this case, it was a school library that partnered with Wing. Now, Wing is one of the Google companies. Alphabet is the big parent company. Wing is a drone delivery company that's owned by Google. And when the pandemic closed libraries, this library actually partnered with Wing to do drone delivery of library materials.
As a school librarian, it is extremely important to me to have connections with my students. So when we went to a period of remote learning, that became a little bit harder to do. How was I going to keep that connection with my students without actually being in the same physical space with them? When I first thought about this, I went to Dr. Mark Meyer, our superintendent of schools, and told him that I had a really, really exciting idea, and that was to use drone to provide library books to our students. Libraries provide a critical and unique service, and during this time of remote learning, our job is even more important. We need to use the available technologies to continue to provide our students with access to our resources. And Wing has provided an outlet for us to do exactly that.
So obviously this is a very small pilot program, but we know that once proof of concept is demonstrated, these things can move very quickly. So I do think that this type of thing is just around the corner. If it can be done efficiently, safely, I do think you'll see it. It's just another way to deliver materials. The future of homebound. And then 3D printing. Basically, I'm not going to go too much into this, but functionally, like many places, we suffered a PPE shortage, personal protective equipment, in 2020. Our physical locations were shuttered, and 3D printing has always been that kind of Swiss Army knife type of technology that can kind of adapt to whatever the need is. So in our case, we worked with Stony Brook Hospital. This is actually my library system in Suffolk County, New York. We took all of our 3D printers out of our shuttered buildings, centralized them at our consortium headquarters, and used them to manufacture 5,000 face shields at a time when it was really difficult to get them. Because we worked with Stony Brook Hospital, which is right nearby, they were able to do the quality control needed before they were distributed to medical personnel. So you'll see that kind of printing bank.
Yeah, lower it, put it on. This is what we're building.
We were able to manufacture 5,000 of those in a reasonably short period of time when we couldn't actually commercially source them. So 3D printing, where's it headed? Well, mobile technology continues to grow, and now mobile is an effective 3D scanner, and it's getting better all the time. That cuts out the need for potentially a $5,000, $6,000 piece of equipment. So that's pretty neat. Color injection is coming increasingly, where instead of having to pick one or two colors, the color, much like a standard 2D printer, is injected directly into the mold. As we notice these supply chain issues, harken back to we couldn't get face shields, right? So we built them. Well, we're in a land of scarcity right now, right? Where it's difficult to source some things, supply chain issues. This is a way, if you cannot actually get it, you can print it or you can fix it. And we're seeing, I think in Australia as well as the United States, this real push for the right to repair, that it shouldn't void the warranty, that you should be able to repair an item yourself, which increasingly is leading to the growth of repair cafes and DIY fixes that are increasingly allowable by law. So that's a lot. I mean, that's kind of a kitchen sink of things that are going on, some trends that you've seen. To quote the great American philosopher, Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until you're punched in the mouth, right? And that's kind of what happened to us, right? We all had 5-year plans. We knew that collections were growing more digital. We saw these emerging technologies coming and we were adapting to them. And then COVID hit. And that was kind of the punch in the face that we got. And so those plans went out the window. Tech changes accelerated. And now we're kind of moving towards more of a recovery and trying to figure out what the new normal is. It's seeing how much of these changes stick, how much of them are now built in customer or patron expectations, and figuring it out because we have limited resources that we need to allocate to these very different patron types. So this is my contact information. I'm happy to take any questions right now. Like I said, I know it's a lot and it kind of comes rapid fire, but I do get excited when it comes to technology and a lot of the changes we've been seeing in the last 2.5 years.
Thank you, Nick. I think I can safely say you've blown all our minds today.
Okay, that's good.
Exciting. I think we all want to investigate those language glasses.
Yeah, as soon as they hit the market, man, I think we're going to jump all over them.
Yeah. There's a couple of comments in the chat box.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's any questions yet. One of the questions I had was if you have any advice on how public libraries can keep on top of these trends, but also get the balance right. So I know with our library, sometimes it feels like we run and do this and then we do that and then we tried to do it all. But is it better to kind of do one or two things and get that right rather than try and be everything to everyone?
It's always good to do one thing well, right, than 5 things poorly. What I do tend to say to libraries is, you know, we're all guilty of sometimes chasing the shiny object, right? Or trying to be the cool kid on the block and do the thing no one else is doing. We're doing it because the cool kids were doing it. Yeah. Typically, when I'm looking at adopting a technology, I want to make sure that I have a plan because that's where you get staff resistance too, is when there's no plan, it's just dumped on them. So that means basically making sure that it matches my my mission, my library's mission, that I've already thought about how I'm going to use this, making sure I can get that ROI, return on investment for it, and making sure that I have training in place that's appropriate for how I'm intending to use the technology, so that by the time it's rolled out to the patron, they're getting a good experience. I have given it some thought, and sometimes when you give it thought, you say, you know what, the more I thought about this, it's not good. The other thing I would say is when it comes to acquiring technology, they're always expensive at the outset. And I tend to jump in when it's affordable by my organization, but still prohibitively expensive for my patrons. Think of like the 3D printer. Your average patron doesn't have, you know, $3,000 to shell on a 3D printer. It is an affordable prospect for the library. And now, because I spent that money, folks who get hands-on are able to experience it, able to get that critical access that they otherwise wouldn't get. And enough hands are going to pass over it to kind of get that return on investment.
Just have a flick through the comments, see if there's any questions. Yep, I think everyone's as fascinated as me.
We have one question, Rachel, from Murray.
Oh, yes.
Asking Nick, how do you suggest addressing privacy concerns from people who worry about being recorded by some of the new technology?
Yeah, no, great question, because when we look at technology, too often technology is convenience, but convenience comes at the cost of privacy. And those are two competing things. And some people don't care about privacy, and some people care very much about privacy. I tend to pursue it from a standpoint of informed consent. You want people to understand what is happening. Nobody should be surprised when they come to a program that they're being recorded. They should also have a reasonable accommodation where they don't have to be on camera. And that's just using a program as an example. Some technologies by nature, you know, a drone is a flying lawnmower with a spy cam on it, right? So I do think you need to just be very upfront about what the technology can do, what are the privacy concerns. Some libraries, if you look at San Jose Public Library, they did a very, very in-depth privacy audit. And there's a page where you can go and see exactly how every third-party service they use, every digital collection, how they use patron information, what's shared, what isn't, what's private, how long it's kept. So certainly there are ways to address this.
Thanks, Nick. I was curious about the screenless web browsing, and I guess it ties back to the previous speaker who was talking about like misinformation. Without us physically being able to see where is it pulling the information from, whether it's a reliable source or how that exactly.
That is one of my concerns because, you know, if you do an internet search, you get those first 10 Google results, right? And you may go a little deeper. Although I heard somebody refer to the second page of Google results as the dark web, like nobody actually goes there. But I don't know that people exercise that much critical thinking on a typical search, never mind. When you do a voice search, when I say, hey, Siri, and I get an answer, nobody ever says, hey, that's BS. They tend to just accept that, right? Now, voice search does name the source, but I don't know that we pursue it as aggressively, as cautiously as we do with the search we're performing ourselves. So I am absolutely concerned about that. I think it's a much shallower search.
Perhaps the questions being asked don't require that at this stage, that more in-depth analysis.
Yeah.
I think that's all. Yeah, lots of ideas for everyone to think about.
Yeah, and I would point out too, you know, many new technologies are expensive, but typically there's a way to engage even with an expensive technology inexpensively. There tends to be a low cost point of entry, low cost point of entry. If you think creatively, certainly you can go and spend a stupid amount of money on a thing. I tend to advocate an incremental approach. I prefer to have patrons mad that I'm not investing enough money in a thing than to have to try to walk something back after I've spent the funds.
Yeah. I think a few of us would like to create a tour of our libraries too. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a neat piece of equipment. But again, you can take a room, take 360 photos, do a panoramic, throw it into something like StorySphere, which is free, and make a very simple tour of a room, of a space, with information panels, with voiceover. So that would be that kind of low cost entry point.
Yeah, great. I think that's all for questions. Thank you so much for your time today, Nick. We really appreciate it. We may all have anglerfish nightmares tonight, but apart from that.
Yeah, well, hey, listen, I saw the wildlife in Australia, so don't you tell me.
You can scare us. Thank you
okay, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, we're just going to have a short break now. We finished a little bit earlier, so we'll come back at 20 to 12.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming back. My name's Michelle and I traditionally work on the land of the Wiradjuri people at Albury City Libraries. And today I'm actually working from beautiful Marrickville, which is the traditional homes of the Gadigal people. So I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome everyone back to our second session before lunchtime. And we have some wonderful, wonderful speakers here giving us short bites about different things. And our first one up is Kelly Woods from Shoalhaven Libraries. And she's going to talk about the professional development discussions. Over to you, Kelly.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, I'm here at Shoalhaven Library in Ewan Country, and it's lovely to be here. I've enjoyed this seminar so much. The talks have been great, and that did blow my mind. That talk about all that technology, it was amazing. So I'm going to quickly talk about the professional development reading group that the idea was discussed at last year's seminar, and it got off the ground and it's been going ever since. I don't have to tell you all that professional reading is important. We work in libraries and we value reading and learning and information. But I will quickly say that professional reading helps us to be aware of trends and happenings in the industry, helps us learn about new approaches and new ideas that could help improve our library service. And it's generally great helping us to stay connected. For me personally, professional reading is something that easily slips down my to-do list, and having this group keeps me accountable and means I will read at least one article each month, which is better than nothing. Our group works like any other book club. At the beginning of the month, I'll send out the month's reading via the PLN and add the info to the wiki. And then we'll meet at 4 p.m. on the last Wednesday of the month to discuss the reading. The attendance varies, which is fine. We understand that we're all busy. Even so, the discussion is usually really interesting, and it's always nice to check in with other librarians and hear about what's happening in their libraries. Particularly during COVID, it was really nice to see where everybody was at in terms of reopening and how things were going in their communities. We read articles on a whole range of topics. We've read about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, the importance of reading, how to serve communities during a crisis, the importance of relevance of libraries in general. These articles are all listed and linked on the wiki if you wanted to catch up or have a look at them. We're always looking for ideas for readings too. So if you ever come across anything good, feel free to send it through to us. Obviously, we'd love to see you at the meeting, but it's fine if you don't want to come. But yeah, always looking for new readings. So that would be great if you have any good ones. If you're interested in coming along, you'll find information about the reading group on the References and Services Working Group Wiki, and also in the emails that we send out on the PLN. We're meeting tomorrow, by the way. Hopefully we'll see some of you there. And yeah, that's it from me. I'm not sure if Ellen, if you want to add anything.
I'm just putting the link in the wiki.
Cool. Anyone have any questions? It's pretty straightforward. Sorry that was so quick, Michelle.
No, that's okay.
Is there anything else? And I don't know if anyone's got questions. I doubt it. It's very straightforward, and we don't bite. It's always a really nice chat. So yeah, come along.
And it's even good if you read the wrong article by accident. I've done that.
No judgment. No judgment.
Is there a standout article that comes to mind that people enjoyed, Kelly?
Well, I really liked that series of articles that included Dr. Cook's Tell Me Sweet Little Lies. That series. Sorry, I'm stuttering. Can't remember the name of them. They've got a funny name, but there was a series of 3 or 4 that we read from that were just great. There was one called Lizard People in the Library, and there was Nicole Cook's one, and yeah, so they were really good. I think they were probably, for me, the most interesting. But yeah.
Yep. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, yes, and people have enjoyed Nicole Cook's article, and Lizard People was nice too. So yeah. Thank you. You kept well to your 5 minutes.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to introduce our next 5-minute speaker, which is Catherine Johnsy. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Catherine, from Blue Mountains Libraries. And she's going to talk about Super eLibrarian. Over to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, I'm Catherine. I'm on Darug and Gundungurra country here in the Blue Mountains. So during lockdown, we wanted to keep our borrowers connected to the library by promoting some of our online resources. So we decided to produce several fun videos. We kept each video short. It was around each was around the kind of 2-minute mark, so that people weren't put off about watching, you know, a 20-minute video. I happen to own a decent camera and proper editing software, but all you really need is a white wall, a phone, a tripod, or someone with a super steady hand. A free editing app it's not complicated editing, and somebody who happened to be me, willing to sacrifice their dignity and vanity for the sake of the library. We made 20 videos, which we uploaded to YouTube, and we promoted them via our website, social media, and our e-newsletter, and also council promoted it through some of their channels as well. Some videos were focused on specific e-resources such as Storybox Library or Gale Interactive Science, but most were theme-based, and so we could cover multiple resources. So themes included poetry, Shakespeare, gardening, travel, true crime. We also made a few where I just read out quirky historical local newspaper articles from Trove and used it to promote our local studies collections. If you want to watch some, you can visit our Blue Mountains Library Facebook page, our YouTube page, sorry. But I just cut down 2 videos, one pajama party and one big day out. It's just to give you a bit of an example of what they were. A couple of notes on the videos. One is that I really do not like transitions in videos, you know, like where it spins around or fades in and out. But I have added them to this video just so you know where I've cut stuff out, so it makes a bit more sense. And also just to note that we did caption all of our videos, but in my rush, I didn't properly export the captions on the first video, so you won't see them on that video, but you'll see them in the second video. So I'm just going to share my screen, and I'll just show you a couple of the videos. All right. And I hope the sound works. If it doesn't, let me know.
Hi, I'm Catherine from Blue Mountains Library. In case you haven't been playing along, we've created quite a few short videos to inspire you to explore your library online during lockdown. I sent an email around to colleagues to garner some ideas for more videos. Being the savvy, intelligent professionals that we are, one colleague looked around their home office for some ideas, then down to their current attire, and suggested pajamas. They thought it might be rather topical. I thought it was a joke aimed to brighten my day. But no, a follow-up email appeared, and it seems that there are very few topics you can't explore through our library online resources. So here we go, a tour of your online library resources through the comfort of pajamas. Gale in Context Global Issues lets you analyze news, important global issues and events through topic overviews, multimedia content, and international viewpoints. 673 issues are covered. Age-appropriate material from the child-friendly collection to the adult general reference, and has some great little homepage features, including On This Day, Flash Facts, and Compare Countries. Did you know that Blue Mountains Library has a treasure trove of historical images on Flickr? There is a link from our local studies webpage. Storybox has a couple of Banana in Pajama audiobooks. Indie Reads has The Cat's Pajamas, the Penguin Book of Cliches. Finally, on Storybox Library, you can watch Robin Butler read Howl by Kat Patrick. Along with many other books on Storybox Library, this book comes with suggested activities. So there we have it, the wonderful world of pajamas. Hi, I'm Catherine from Blue Mountains Library. Feeling a little cooped up at home? Well, the library has a great day planned for you with resources to get you out and about in our own backyard. First, we need a map. Search bush trackers on the library catalogue to find 24 maps of local bushwalks. While you're on your walk, why not do some birding? Indie Reads has a regional guide to birds of the southeast coast and ranges. For that matter, Indie Reads by the CSIRO has a field guide on almost everything you can poke a stick at. Once you've identified those birds, or frogs, or spiders, or moths, Why not take a photo of it? BorrowBox has travel photography, a guide to taking better pictures by Lonely Planet, and Libby has photography e-magazines, including Photography Weekly and Australian Photography. Once you're home from your walk, why not put some logs on your outdoor fire pit? Get the fire started and do some cooking. Indie Reads has the Camp Out Cookbook, and BorrowBox has the Camping Cookbook. Once the fire dies down to the glow of embers, jump on the BorrowBox app to freak yourself out with some scary stories. If you can't head outdoors, you can still immerse yourself in these beautiful blue mountains with the Blue Plateau on Indie Reads. If we have to be locked down, the Blue Mountains is a pretty great place to be. Stay safe and keep learning. That's it. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, that's wonderful, Catherine. So you said you got a suite of them. Are they still popular now that COVID has ended?
No, well, I don't know. Actually, I haven't looked at them. I assume not. We were really promoting them during lockdown. But yeah, and I haven't had time. I haven't had time to make any more. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. What editing tool did you use? Question from Sharon Smith.
Yeah, I happen to have Final Cut Pro, which is a professional editing suite, but there's lots of free editing pieces of software. There's apps you can get on your phone. Yeah, I suppose the only complicated thing was that I put in screenshots. And so you just want to make sure your app could do that. But otherwise, you're just on a white wall. And if you manage to take it in one take, you wouldn't have to do much editing, I suppose. Yeah.
I don't know if we're all that as professional as you to be able to get away with one take.
Oh, well, I didn't get away with one take either.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
No worries.
Thank you, Catherine. Ellen, is Yan available?
Yes, I'm available.
Wonderful, yeah.
From Parramatta. Yeah, I'm sorry, just coming a bit late.
No apologies needed, Yan.
Yeah, here we go.
Hi, Yan. Welcome. So, everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Yan Zhang. Is that correct?
Yeah, Yan Zhang. Yeah, thank you.
Yep. From Parramatta Libraries. Yan's going to talk to us today about engaging digitally with your cold community, which is culturally and linguistically diverse communities. So I'm going to hand the ball over to you, and you can go over 5 minutes if you have a bit longer than 5 minutes. Yan, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And we'll start from here. And I will try to talk super fast, but looks like my computer is a bit.
Don't talk fast.
Yeah, can you see it? And I might just do this slideshow from the beginning. Yeah, hope you can see
wonderful.
my share. Yeah,
we can.
Yeah, that's good. And I just bring myself and some notes from there. Sorry, bear with me, and I might just do a little bit. Yeah, and hello everyone, and from Parramatta, I just want to talk and the digital engagement with our code community in the past 2 years. As everybody knows, and we had a really difficult 2 years. And since 2 years and the lockdown started, and we had to really plan well and strategize and with lots of code communities. So how we did do it, and first, and we utilized our existing digital platforms, and we did have a YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Para-Reads blog, and Parapods previously. And gradually we created new platforms, and which is Zoom, live streaming, as well as Paracode podcast. How we come to this, because initially we used the Parapods. Parapods and has been our readers advisory and podcast for quite a while. And usually, it runs the book reviews and the author talks, things like this. But when the COVID hit, when we start to do Paracode, and we use the existing podcast, However, then we gradually found more and more cold language podcasts started. We decided to separate it by the time. So that's how we in June, almost 2 years ago, and we can have a paracode. So at the same time, we enhanced the functions of our lobby's website to make it a central location. Because as you know, all the social media platforms are just floating out there. They hardly have any internal connections, which it was hard for our community members to, navigate through and various of different platforms. So that's how our lobby website has become a central location for that linked all the digital platforms. And thankfully, we actually have a very supportive and very responsive council digital marketing team. And they helped us to make this to happen quite easily. And now I have to move to the next one. Can I just not video myself? Start videoing myself. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with this Zoom. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the next one, and that's how we linked it. And we actually almost revamped our lobby website, and at the beginning of COVID, and then we make everything and link it back to the lobby website. And we utilized almost everything because a podcast is quite easy. Apart from people can actually see from us and search us from lobby website, and they could also use the podcast, Podbeans and the iPhone podcast apps. So we try to make everybody aware of this, because our communities had been quite familiarized with our online existing and social media platforms for many years. So that's how we found because under the assumption, like we always thought that the community, they did not know social media that much, and we might not be able to connect with them, which wasn't the case. Once we're using all our marketing tools and try to reach to them, particularly our e-newsletter, monthly e-newsletter, to reach to them, actually it's quite easy for them to find us and connect with us immediately. So we started, and how did we do it? And we utilized the staff skills. And fortunately, we have a very culturally, linguistically, multicultural staff working lobby. So we utilize the staff's language skills, their digital skills, and provide the guidelines and the training. There are lots of the policies and what you can say, what you cannot say, how you can use the lobby platform, but you do not, advertise it or publish your video first before the lobby could use it, all this kind of thing. And then we really collaborate with the different teams, because Parramatta is quite a large library, and we have about more than 100 staff. So we have staff come across different teams, and we all working together. So we managed to have about 6 different languages. At the same time, and we focus more not only on the popular, we created some new content, but we stick to our monthly core events with the local, national, international significance. And we do have a popular regular programs, and we combine with the leisure reading as well. And also the content not only created by ourselves, but we do have a working partners locally, like Western Sydney Local Health District and Western Sydney Multicultural Group, ACMC, that's Australian Chinese Medical Association. CASE is a community-based and aged care group, and a community nurse, and we worked with them quite closely, so they could provide quite a lot on time and much needed information to meet our community needs. And saying this, it's not always that easy. It's quite challenging because sometimes, and you probably have staff just down to sick, and then you probably had the videos sitting somewhere or the podcast sitting somewhere, and no staff immediately to process it. But however, we actually managed, to going through 2 years and connected thousands of community members online. Just for your information, as one of many outcomes, and about 2 years, we produced 118 new episodes on Paracodes, and we have about 4,600 downloads. That's just for the Paracode, the podcast alone, not mentioning the videos, and we actually had quite a lot of different languages as well. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Yan. Does anyone have any questions for Yan? I don't think we've got any questions, but it sounds like you got really great partnerships with lots of great places, Yan.
Yeah, we do have an existing partnerships throughout local government agencies, non-government agencies. I think we have worked very well. And I think the other thing is, you really need supportive teams from council, because they are involved with a lot of leadership, council comms, council digital teams, and the media policy, and what you can do and what you cannot do. And a lot of stuff that was first time for them to actually made something for the community. So they needed to be aware on what's allowed, what's not allowed. So that was a lot of strategies involved. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yan, for 5 minutes. Coming up lunchtime now. Is that correct, Ellen?
Yes, and then we're back at 1 p.m.
1 o'clock. Okay, everyone, we're going to have lunch. Feel free to go and tap some other colleagues on the shoulders and let them know they're missing out on a fantastic seminar. And we'll see you back at 1 o'clock with Corey, talking about deadly. Everyone. Now that we're recording, welcome back everyone for the second half of today's sessions. And the session now is not Corey. I'm sorry, I misled you before lunch. The session on now is what's new in statewide services. And our presenters are Abby Dawson, Catherine Bryant, and Michael Adams from the State Library. And I'm going to hand the ball over to you guys. Have fun.
Hi. Sorry, the person who is going to be sharing the screen, I'm just going to check that he's here. Are you, Michael, are you there?
Yes, he is.
Oh, good. There we go. Well, while Michael's getting started, I'll just say thank you all for coming. And I'm Catherine, as you can see from my name up there. And today, Michael, Abby and I are going to talk about statewide services. So but by that, I mean Find Legal Answers, Drug Info, all the statewide databases, Indie Reads, and the Multicultural Service. We're just briefly going to touch on what's new in the services, and we're also and touch on how these services can be used when providing reference. We're going to finish with a reminder about the PLS e-news and encourage you all to subscribe so you can keep up to date with professional development. And I'm just going to make that small. And I just wanted to let you know that we've created a handout. So everything we're going to talk about today, there's going to be a handout. So don't worry about writing stuff down. We'll provide a handout with links to everything that we're going to be talking about today. Okay, so the next screen, please, Michael. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is some new training. Sorry. So in order to assist people who've got legal problems, it's obviously important for library staff to know where to get to find legal information and sources of help. As you know, we've always had Find Legal Answers and drug info training, but to make it easier for everybody to do training, we're just about to release a brand new online version of the Find Legal Answers training. It's going to be available via the PL portal. I think many of you may have already used the portal to do the online drug info or Discover SL modules. This is the latest one. So in this new course, you'll learn about Find Legal Answers service, what it is, and how you can provide legal information to your community. It's going to have 7 modules, and they're going to cover what Find Legal Answers is, how to provide legal information to the community, the difference between information and advice. Obviously, we'll have exercises on the toolkit and the website, and we're also going to have we've got a big module, or not a big module, we've got a module about how to manage Find Legal Answers in your library. We've made the course as interactive as we could, so we've got a mixture of text to read, we've got videos and slideshows, short exercises and quizzes. We're getting it tested at the moment, but we expect it'll take between 1 and 2 hours to complete, and you don't have to do all the modules in one go. I've just sent the training to 10 public library staff for feedback. I'm hoping they'll get their feedback back to me by early June. I'll spend a week or so making necessary changes as a result of that feedback, and then we'll open the course up to everyone. When it's available, I'll send an email out to the network. Obviously, it'll also go on our website, and that email and website will include information about the course, including how to log in, etc. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about is we've got a brand new book. It's very exciting. I'm going to shortly be sending this out to all public libraries. So it's a new book that's going to be in the Find Legal Answers toolkit. As you can see from the picture, it's called Dealing with Debt, a Legal Guide to Personal Debt in New South Wales. It's a new version of the old toolkit book. Many of you would have had the old green Debtor's Guide to Local Courts in New South Wales. I hope nobody's got that anymore, because that was removed from the toolkit quite some time ago. But the new title reflects a change of focus. Although much of the book does deal with what to do if you are taken to the local court because of a debt you owe someone, it also discusses how to deal with other types of debt, such as fines, government debt, by which we mean things like HECS or child support, unpaid loans, unpaid bills, mortgages, and debt caused by car accidents. And it also includes sample court forms and letters, something that we know that people find useful. It's really hard to sort of write those forms out yourself, so it's really good to have them in this book. We didn't write the book. We never write books. It was written by a solicitor from the MacArthur Legal Centre, and it was funded by a grant from the Law and Justice Foundation. We've got a really long-standing relationship with the Law and Justice Foundation and the New South Wales legal sector, including community legal centres like the MacArthur Legal Centre. So we all work together, and the State Library published the book. So we also designed the book, did editing, and we're arranging the printing and distribution. The book's actually with the printer right now. We'll send it out to public libraries within the next few weeks. It will be sent out as an update to your toolkit collection. As you know, with toolkit books, we usually provide 2 free copies to every library service, and libraries buy extra copies that they need for any of their branches. But this is a book we've published, so we're not going to charge you. So like Neighbours in the Law and Rest Assured, we'll send you enough copies to for all your branches basically, and we won't charge you for any replacement copies if they get lost. Okay, one thing that often comes up when we go out to training or when we go to visit libraries for other reasons is people say, oh, we never get asked a legal question. And that may well be true, but even if you're never asked a legal question at the desk, there are lots of ways in which you can provide a really important legal information to your community. So this is taken from the training, so these images are some of the ones we use in the training, and it's really good, just a good reminder of all the things that libraries can do. So the first thing you can do, of course, is display promotional material. We provide free Find Legal Answers promotional material such as bookmarks, flyers, etc. And these are just used, obviously, to let your community know that there is legal information available in your library. The other thing you can do is have a small collection of legal aid or pamphlets from other organisations. Pamphlets are really good because they allow clients to take them, to pick them up and take them away. They may never ask you a question, but they may see that there's a family law or that crashed your car pamphlet and take them away. The other what's really good about pamphlets is that they're free, very easy to replace, and often they're available in community languages as well. One thing which is really good for libraries to do is to display your toolkit collection in a prominent place in your library. Just have a think about where your toolkit is. Is it up the back? Would it be worth moving it? Even if you just moved it during Law Week, is it just a good idea to move it around and just let people know that you do have plain language legal information in your community? Another thing you can do, and I know many of you would have just done it last week, is to provide programs. So consider maybe hosting a community legal education talk during Law Week, or you can do a talk during Seniors Festival or Youth Week, or actually any time of the year. Some libraries, for example, work with their local community legal centre and do present talks throughout the year. Another thing that libraries do is to take Find Legal Answers out into the community. So some libraries have reported that they've done a display at a shopping centre or expos, or you go to local high schools and give talks to HSC legal studies students, or one library I know takes promotional material to their local police station just to let people know that there's legal information available for them if they're in trouble with the law. And another thing, of course, that I know many of you do is to promote legal information via your library's social media channels. So we actually have suggested posts and images on our Public Library Services website that you can use. So even if you do never get asked a direct legal question, by doing these things, you're still providing legal reference service to your community. Now, before I hand over to Michael to talk about drug info, I'm going to finish by showing you a video from the new online Find Legal Answers training. One of the things that sometimes comes up when we are doing training is the idea that, as we're not lawyers, we shouldn't be giving legal advice. And this is, of course, true. I'm not a lawyer. I'm pretty sure most of us watching today aren't lawyers, so we can't give advice. But this doesn't mean we just send people out the door and tell them they can't get any help from us, of course, which I know you'd never do. We can provide information. Libraries provide information about a range of topics, and the law is just another topic. So the new online training course has a module on legal information and includes a short video on this topic. It's called Legal Advice versus Legal Information. And we thought we'd share this video today for a sneak peek of the training. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. Hey, everyone, I'm Michael here to talk about drug info and a couple of other things. So drug info is similar to Find Legal Answers in that it's a service that's provided through public libraries. Just a very quick introduction for anyone who may not be familiar. So it's a partnership between us at the State Library and New South Wales Health. It's been accessible through public libraries for over 20 years. And the philosophy behind it is drug info makes quality, up-to-date information about drugs and alcohol accessible and freely available. So what better place than public libraries? And so drug info consists of the collection of books and pamphlets that public libraries have, the drug info website that we administer, and also a series of promotions and activities that can be delivered through public libraries. And so I'm going to be giving an update on some of the latest of those. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Drug Fact Finder. So this is a tablet-based interactive display which will introduce interesting facts about different drugs that we're at the moment kind of softly launching to public libraries. So basically it's going to replace the large panels of the Drug and Alcohol Info Hub that some of you may have had at your libraries in the past. And the idea is it is more portable, more interactive, hopefully with the nice colors, it'll make a striking display in the library. And we're going to be working on developing some new signage and some new display items to go with the Drug Fact Finder, and they'll still be sent out to libraries on a rotational basis. But one of the real advantages of the Drug Fact Finder is that it can be displayed at any time. So you don't need to wait until you're hosting the hub. You can, set it up in your library on your own tablet and, iPad stand, along with some drug info signage and promotional material. So that can be done at any time. So there are a few reasons behind going down this route. Firstly is just to provide a refreshment of the content and the way of presenting drug info, which I think you need to do every so often. But secondly, having this allows us to go mobile with it, and it gives more options to libraries who have been very creative in the past at getting drug info programming in their libraries and out into the community. So we see some great examples from public libraries, setting up a mocktail display or a mocktail bar at a youth week event, or taking it out to schools and various other initiatives like this. So what you can do with this is to do that a lot easier. And on the other side of things, it also gives libraries who, for whatever reason, haven't traditionally done a lot with drug info, a very low barrier entry into promoting their service to their communities. So what's on it? Whoops, sorry, I went too far. So basically, it's got these nice, colorful images at the start. It's got information about 16 different drugs. And my fancy thing's not working now, so I'll have to just pretend you're looking at a lot of different information flashing up on the screen. But it has interesting facts, including long and short-term effects of drugs. There's quiz questions, QR code links to more detailed information on the Drug Info website. So you can expect more information about the Drug Fact Finder to come out soon, but in the meantime, it's available now to try out. So the link to the Drug Fact Finder is available in the handout that you'll have access to this afternoon. It's been designed to work best in portrait mode on iPads and other tablets. So please, test it out. Let us know what you think. If it's not working, please get in touch straight away, because we want to make sure when we roll it out widely, it's all good to go. But yeah, we love your feedback, and if you could get in there and have a play around, that would be really good. So one of the other ways we try to get the drug info message out to the community is through social media. So at the moment, one of the things we're working on is making resources for public library staff more accessible and, creating more content on that front. So, my aim, or what I'd love to see, is if every library service could post once a month something about drug info, that would be a huge result for us. But I need to be a bit careful in saying that, because our messaging comes straight from New South Wales Health. So it's really important that the messaging from public libraries is in alignment to that. And that's why we've assisted in the past with creating text for social media, different images and other resources that public libraries can use. And so, as I said, we're working to develop more of these, as well as making that information more accessible and user-friendly. So one of the things we've done is to include a drug info social media section to our monthly newsletter. And again, you'll hear more about that from Abby a bit later. And we also highlight campaigns. You can see on the screen here, we've got our own campaign. So Mocktails social media, the Alcohol Get the Facts video that we produced a while ago, as well as social media campaigns from New South Wales Health and other partner organisations. So you can see here on the screen the Every Moment Matters campaign from FAIR, and that's around pregnancy and alcohol, as well as the Facts About Vaping, which is a campaign from New South Wales Health. And that is a segue to the other thing I want to talk about, which is vaping information. So this is a really hot button topic in the alcohol and other drug space lately. I've noticed it at workshops and other presentations we've given that we're starting to get a lot of questions about vaping. And I can also see that from other presentations I've attended. There seems to be a real appetite for information about vaping in the community. And until recently, we've had very little information available. So our A to Z to drugs on the Drug Info website had like a 2-line section on vaping. And that was, there's a few things going on. It's a fairly recent trend. So it's hard to get the information when the trend is still developing. And it's also difficult because there's so many different vape products. So it's hard to get definitive information. And, particularly in terms of long-term effects, it's hard to say anything definitive. So last year, we created a new vaping page on the A to Z of drugs, where we gathered the best information we could get from New South Wales Health and, other, partner organisations such as the Matilda Centre and the Cancer Council. And so that's been available for about a year, and it's got some really good information while we waited for more information from New South Wales Health. And luckily that information has now come. So there is a campaign and a website from New South Wales Health, the Facts About Vaping. And this is centered around the line, do you know what you're vaping? And you can see with the poster here, some of the same chemicals in vapes you can also be found in insect repellent and nail polish remover and various other products that you wouldn't necessarily want to put into your body. So the website has a lot of really good information. It's primarily targeted towards young people, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly is that that demographic is a significant cohort in terms of the people who are vaping, and also they're the cohort that are potentially most at risk. So while some argue the benefits of switching from smoking to vaping, with young people, the issue is that the trend is that young people who have never smoked are taking up vaping, and evidence suggests that they're 3 times more likely to take up smoking than those who don't vape. So this campaign provides information for young people as well as parents, teachers, other people in the community, health professionals. So the website has FAQs and information, as well as some really useful social media resources. So you can download the campaign assets and start sharing those through your social media channels. And what we've been working on, which will be coming soon and distributed through public libraries, is a postcard based around this campaign. So it'll look very similar to what you're seeing on the screen here, and it will just go along with the other promotional material that we offer through Drug Info. So hopefully that's not too far away, but watch this space, and that will be available for distribution. And the last thing on Drug Info, and this is for Fine Legal Answers as well, is if you would like to hear more from us, you can get us to come out to your library, and we offer a 3.5-hour training workshop in Drug Info and Fine Legal Answers. Details about how you can book one of those and learn a bit more about what's in the program can be found on the fact sheet that we'll be distributing. But yeah, please get in touch. We would love to get out and talk more about it. So the last thing I'm going to talk about before I hand over to Abby is just a very quick update on the statewide databases. So at the moment, the New South Wales.net Content Working Group is reviewing the feedback that's been received from public libraries about the databases on offer through Gale. And this feedback, along with the usage statistics, will guide the decision on what the 22-23 database suite will look like. So at this stage, we're not anticipating any major changes to the offering. There may be a couple of differences, but an announcement on what will be in next year's package will be made in early June. So just while we're talking about the databases, I just wanted to mention some of the support materials on offer. So there's some really useful stuff within these databases that the usage is showing us aren't, being used as much as it maybe should be. So there's a range of promotional resources available through Gale. So on the Gale website, there's some social media copy, along with a lot of images, icons, and other things you can share through social media. There's also some specially designed New South Wales.net collateral, which is available on a share drive. You'll have links to all of this on your handout. There's also a number of webinars that have been produced on each databases, and there's a New South Wales.net YouTube channel on which you can see these webinars. There's, as I said, a webinar on each of the databases. There's some admin or backend information. We also have a testimonial from our Blue Mountains Super E-librarian, Catherine, that you heard speak earlier this morning. So we will also be working on some ways of promoting the databases a bit more. So watch this space, and on that, I will hand over to Abby.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Abby. I'm here to talk to you today about Indie Reads and multicultural services. First, I'd just like to highlight some of the collections on Indie Reads that might be useful for you or interesting. In case you don't know, Indie Reads is the e-content platform through which the State Library provides a statewide collection of ebooks and e-audio for public libraries and their members, with a focus on Australian and international independently published titles, as well as literary, classic and award-winning titles, and a couple of other things that I'll talk about. So you can see here on the screen the Untapped collection. Untapped is a project where authors, libraries and researchers are collaborating to identify Australia's lost literary treasures, long out of print and inaccessible to readers, to bring them back to life and make them accessible again. So more than 150 titles, including winners of Australia's most prestigious literary awards, such as the Miles Franklin, have been republished as ebooks, and these are available on Indie Reads. You can find early works by authors such as Gary Disher, Anita Heiss, Jackie French, Louis Nowra, and many more. These titles have been licensed under an unlimited simultaneous access license, and as such would be a really great option for running a book club, because you can have as many people as you like read them at the same time. Resources for you to promote this collection are also available on the Indie Reads social media page, which is linked in the handout that Michael was talking about. And moving on to the next slide. You'll also find this great collection of library and information science titles, which we've purchased to help support professional development for public library staff, and a range of different topics to do with libraries. And Michael's put a link in the handout, but you can also find these by typing library into the search box on Indie Reads, and then you'll see a subject heading, which is language arts and library and information studies, with about 190 titles, just to take you straight into that collection. And as you can see on my next slide here, we've also been doing a lot of work to develop collections in languages other than English. And as you can see here, we've now got 9 collections. The Polish will be shortly available once it's been processed through. And we've been working with public library staff and community members with language skills to select these collections, and also asking them for feedback on what's not available, such as popular authors, titles, and publishers, so that we can pass that feedback on to our content provider. We know there's some limitations in the content that's currently available, but as it's early days, we're hoping that we can work with the provider to continue improving this. And on the next slide, you can see how you can promote these collections. We've created signage in both English and language that you can use in your digital screens. So the one on the left there, that's available in both portrait and landscape on the website. And we're also currently developing resources so you can promote the collections on social media. So you can see here the Chinese and Romanian collateral that's already been created, and we're working on doing this for the rest of the languages, and we'll share that once that's been done. And then finally, we're moving into the last phase, or the next phase of Indie Reads, which will be working with libraries to add their digitized or digital local studies content to the platform. So this will be a great opportunity for libraries to make their important local history content available and easily accessible, particularly if you don't have a dedicated hosting and distribution solution for your local studies content. So stay tuned for more information on this from Ross in the not too distant future. We're hoping to get this underway in July. And then now a little bit about multicultural. So just a reminder that we've got the bulk loan service of 42 different languages available if you need to help community members in your library. We know in particular there's a number of people arriving from the Ukraine. We've seen stories about Northern Beaches and Georges River LGAs receiving quite large groups, and I'm sure this is happening across the state. But the Ukrainian collection we've got has been updated significantly in the last couple of years, so there's a lot of new fiction and children's books available should you need to help people. And we're also excited to launch a new collection this year called Telugu. This is a language mainly spoken in southern India, and you can see some pictures of the covers on the screen. These communities are based in Western Sydney, and the collection will be available for bulk loan from this Friday, and official launches will be held at Blacktown on the 4th of June, and at Cumberland Libraries on a date to be confirmed, as this is the area where the main communities are based. And since I've got the opportunity, I'm just going to remind you of a couple of tools that you can use to promote and work with your core communities. So you can see on the screen the yellow books in your language digital signage. We've got 2 versions of this one. The one you can see says, please ask the librarian. So you can use that in the library on your digital screens or as a poster that you pop up somewhere. And there's also a second version which says, please ask at the library, which you can use to take to your local community organisations, the supermarket, the migrant resource centre, anywhere that you might want to sort of advertise that the service is available. You're welcome to do that. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the multicultural pamphlets, which we also have translated into 55 different languages, which basically gives generic information about library services. And there's 2 versions of this, one which refers to the bulk loan service collections, and one where there isn't a collection, so like Dari or Dinka, and some of the collections that other libraries have that we don't. And on the next slide, just a reminder, you can see the community language directory, which tells you what libraries have what languages. So my example, you can see I've looked up Bonnyrigg Library, and you can see they've got 4 different collections. And likewise, I've looked up Japanese, and you can see what libraries have that. So that's a really useful tool if somebody's looking for a collection that you don't have or we don't have. And you can also click through from the library name onto the New South Wales net map that gives you all the information on where the library is. And then the final tool that you might find useful is the multilingual glossary, which is a tool of common library phrases that's been translated into 55 languages. And then you can download the term once it's been translated and use it for signage or in any material that you need. So you can select, I've just given you an example here, you select the language you want, then you select the term and you translate it, and then you can see I've chosen Croatian borrow here, and it tells you the term. And then you get the option to download an image, which is a sort of a static image of what the text should say, and then you get a Word document with the text that you can manipulate. But you get the image because sometimes your computer might not have the correct fonts installed, so you'll get squiggles and boxes. And if that happens, the fonts are also there available to download and install if you need it. And the final update from Multicultural Services is that we are currently running spotlight into multicultural service sessions to highlight different aspects of delivering services to multicultural communities. Each month, a different library will talk about a different project or activity or partnership that they've set up with a little overview of their community, the work that they do, and then time for questions. So we had the first session last month with Blacktown, which was really interesting, hearing about their Multicultural Ambassadors project, where they've worked with members of the community to raise awareness of the library and the services. And on this Thursday at 10 o'clock, we've got a session with Liverpool, and they are talking about the importance of signage and language and some other things to do with library displays. So in the handout, there's a link for the Multicultural Services Wiki where you can register for that. Come along, you know, it's always really interesting to hear what people have to say. And we're also updating the links with the recordings to the session so you can watch back later as well. And then finally, as Michael said, I'm here to remind you to don't forget to sign up for the PLS e-newsletter to keep up to date with everything that we've been talking about today and more. These are coming out now on a monthly basis and include upcoming opportunities, training, professional development and promotions that you can run on your social media. And again, I think the link is in the handout. So that's everything from us. I think Michael has to run away now, but Catherine and I are happy to answer any questions that you have. What does the chat say?
Okay, thank you very much, Abby, and thank you, Michael, and thank you, Catherine, for presenting for us. Does anyone have any questions or want more information on any of those things? No? No. Well, we've got a little bit of time before Corey comes along to chat. Does anyone have any
early? I can see, Kirsty, that you're here already. Hopefully you're okay to start a little early. So Kirsty Plumridge from Penrith Library is going to talk to us today about the mental health initiatives that they've been doing. Thanks, Kirsty.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Rachel. Let me just get my screen up. Share. Can you see my presentation? Everything in Zoom is covering up.
Yes, it looks great.
Slideshow from beginning. Where did we go? That's better. Hello, everyone. I'll try to keep you as awake as possible at this point of the day. My name's Kirsty Plumridge and I work for Penrith City Council, and I started my new position there as Outreach and Programs Librarian in January of last year. And one of my initial plans was to do a mental health month initiative. It was something I had done at my previous council, and obviously mental health is such an important topic, and there's quite a bit of funding around for mental health. There's a lot of focus on it, so it's a perfect opportunity to partner with local organisations, which I did. So we had meetings initially with Headspace, who are the National Youth Mental Health Foundation for young people, 12 to 25 years. And as many of you will be aware, October is our peak time for young people to be using the library, in particular our HSC students. So it really correlates well with partnering with Headspace. And when we initially met up with them, they were coming into the library. They were going to come in October during the October school holidays, when we have a captive audience of young people, for a series of pop-up events. They were going to have information there. We were going to do breakout sessions with yoga and other things, and, you know, just giving them tips and tricks about how to deal with the stress of the HSC period. We also met with NEMI National, which is another local mental health organisation, and they provide mental health, homelessness and suicide prevention, and they do they have a lot of drop-in centres that people can come in. They have support groups for people with mental health issues. So yeah, and we had partnered with them at my previous council, so I knew about them and approached them about partnering with us for Mental Health Month in October. And they were really pleased because it was an opportunity for them to promote their services as well. So they were going to be displaying their art therapy. So they have art therapy groups with their people that come into their centres, and we were going to put an exhibition on for them. And in turn, they were also going to be doing a series of mental health talks on wellbeing matters. And that was something that they usually offered to their clients, but they were going to be doing it just for the general public as well, because obviously mental health is everyone's business, not just those that suffer depression and other mental health issues. And in addition, we're also going to do some in-house, mindfulness activities, some colouring in sessions, some meditation, yoga, all of those kinds of things. However, lockdown happened, and all of our well-laid plans had to be modified, most of which we moved to online space. So the sessions that were going to be a drop-in session were now a free online drop-in session, and Headspace actually had offices in Blacktown as well. So this was something that was offered to students at both Penrith libraries and Blacktown's libraries. They did 3 sessions, each session focusing on a different sort of aspect of mental health and coping with the HSC. So the first session was called Take a Deep Breath. And the team at Headspace actually facilitated those. So they gave information to the students. They gave them all sorts of tips on dealing with stress. And we partnered with a local yogi that we know of, who also did a yoga session at the end of that session for the students as well. The second session was kind of an inspirational session, and they had a rugby league player, Tamana Tahu, come in and talk about keeping motivated throughout the period, which I sense for the last group of HSC students would have been quite important, given that their HSC got progressively longer and more drawn out. And this kind of impacted our activities in a sense, because where we thought they would be in their main study period before their HSC exams, they actually had another few weeks after that. So it kind of impacted possibly some of the attendance for those. The final session, which was from all our feedback was the most meaningful, they had a panel of ex-students who had all gone through the HSC and successfully received high ATAR scores. And they gave them just a general discussion on what sort of tips and tricks how they managed the stress levels and how they kept up their motivation, all of those things. And in addition, the youth team also created an electronic booklet that they gave out to all of the students in attendance as well, with resources from the library and other tips and tricks on keeping motivated and keeping healthy and getting good sleep, all of those things that are important during stressful periods of your life. We did a midday meditation series. So every Thursday during October at midday, we had a free Zoom session for those that enrolled with a local yoga student. Joelyn from our local yoga studio facilitated those sessions, and each week she did a different style of meditation, and she was fantastic because she was able to also promote many of the resources that we had in the library. So further reading, if people wanted to continue their meditation or try a different style, and she also suggested good apps and things as well. So that was a good complement to it. And Nemo National, who we were going to be doing lots of different things with, ended up just hosting one free Zoom session on Wellbeing Matters. As I mentioned before, this was a sort of session on how taking a sort of holistic approach to your mental health, and how one aspect of your life can really impact, if you're not paying it attention, can really impact on the rest of your life. So it was really it was something that they usually offer to their clients, and hopefully we can do it again this year. We had 9 people register, but you know, these things being the way they are, when it's free and on Zoom, we only had one person turn up, but our facilitator was very happy to go ahead with it, because I guess one person's mental health is as important as anything. So so that went really well as well. Even though we had one person, Jessica was still fabulous and taught me a lot about keeping, keeping motivated and keeping your mental health. What tips and tricks you can to keep strong and yeah. So what are we doing this year? We're going to build on our existing partnerships. So we'll be in contact with Jessica from Nemo National. Hopefully we can do their exhibition of their art therapy group's artworks this year, and maybe do some more Wellbeing Matters sessions. We will certainly be partnering with Headspace again to try and offer maybe face-to-face pop-ups in the library with their crew. And we also, there's a new community organisation that approached the library about starting a self-help book club. And so we're in, I'm like, yes, that would be wonderful. And while I've got you, can we talk about what you're doing for October and Mental Health Month? She suggested maybe a panel discussion on mental health. And I know Beyond Blue have speakers, so I guess something just to explore all the different facets of mental health and to get to learn more about people's experiences. Short and sweet, that's me. If you have any other questions about our Mental Health Month, I would just suggest that you start talking to your local organisations, start planning well ahead of October so you can get in. They often have funding to do programs for Mental Health Month, so it's a perfect opportunity to say, we've got spaces, we've got groups, come on into the library. And Lorinda, our children's programs librarian, she was the one that was helping with the Headspace program as well. So if you have any questions, her contact details are there. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Kirsty. That was great. And I hope your plans this year.
I hope they go well, better than last year too.
No, that was great. I think there was one question I saw in the chat. How well attended were these sessions? I know you said the one that only had the one attend.
We had one. The yogi sessions, we had on average about up to 10 people per session for the midday meditation. It kind of fluctuated between weeks and what other people, when people started going back to work and things like that, it kind of modified the attendance. But the HSC sessions, they had at their last session, because these things often build momentum, they had 15 people from Penrith that booked and 4 young adults from Blacktown. So yeah, they started off with like maybe 8 students at the first week, but it sort of built momentum as the weeks went on. So yeah,
great.
I think face-to-face much better, but yeah, especially for HSC students, because there's such a captive audience in October. So
absolutely. Yeah, I really like the idea of the self-help book club too.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see how I can report on that next time, how that's going.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kirsty. Any other questions? I think that's it for now. Thanks, Kirsty.
Thank you.
Next, we have Yasmin Greenhalgh from Stanton Library. I'm just going to talk about library book test drives. Yasmin couldn't be here today, but she's kindly recorded her talk for us. So I think Ellen will play that shortly.
Okay. Hi.
I think, Ellen, are you still trying to get that up and running?
From my perspective, it's up and running. So I'll go back to the beginning and I will reshare. And I won't fiddle with anything. That might have been the problem. And can someone let me know in chat that they can hear it, please?
It looks like the screen sharing's not working. Oh, wait, it's popped up now. There we go.
Okay. Hi, my name is Yasmin Greenhalgh. I am a collection development librarian at Stanton Library in North Sydney Council. This is on Camaragal land, and I acknowledge the Camaragal people as the traditional owners of this land, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. Thank you. I am here to talk to you about our non-fiction promotion library book test drives that we've been doing on Instagram. My apologies that I'm not with you today in person. I'm out of phone range, but I'm excited that I get to do this. Let me get my little slides up. Library book test drives. These are hands-on practical book reviews for non-fiction books. They're visual reviews, ideal for Instagram. You could probably use them on TikTok or something like that. They're mostly targeting practical books because it is visual. If you want to follow along online or follow us now on Instagram, it's Stanton_library. So the library book test drives. Why? We wanted to do them as a change from the expected book reviews. There's not really any story arc or protagonist or particular writing style that, talking about the writing style will only get you so far with a non-fiction book. And we thought I thought about what sort of format might work with non-fiction books. And doing test drives like this works with the content and what people might want from non-fiction books. It works with the visual social media. You could also probably translate it to posters or shelf tags. And it's been really lovely on Instagram. It humanises the library service and staff to patrons. So it's been a case of putting in something that's a little bit more personable amongst the libraries closed now and here's this event on. So that was just a way of breaking that down, and it's been a really lovely way of connecting with other colleagues around their interests. So if you know that someone's into doing the amigurumi little crochet, you could feature that. If you know someone that's into DIY or gardening, or it's a wonderful way to get to know folks. So that's been good fun. So let's get into the how we've done it as well. Here's our first one we did. We took photos of what we did with the actual, the front of the book cover, the inside, so the actual project, recipe, pattern that you used, and we said how it was. Was it easy? Was it hard? Could you adapt it? That sort of thing. And then you make sure you put a shiny book stack of similar books there as well. That's really good because it directs people to know that they've got more resources and not just one shiny book. You've got many shiny books in the library. I use Canva to make these posts. So you've got ones you can slide or videos, or in this case, I embedded a video. We did some cooking for cats. I don't have a cat, but our test driver, I have a goose. Goose is my dog. Isn't she cute? She's a very happy test drive. Keep your posts short, catch their attention in the first couple of seconds, put some moving parts in if you can, make it personable and fun. This one here, we looked for a long time to find the actual publishers and the authors. I could find one of the two authors. So do your research, tag them. What was really lovely about this is in the comments, the author that we tagged got in and went #bug hunt. This is how I like to bug hunt. So that was really fun. Hashtags are free. Use these. Use the library book test drive, library book test drives. I use both. I can't decide yet. Add your own. We would love to see where this goes if other people use them. Check your hashtags before you use them. Don't get yourself in strife. Yeah, just double check them all. Go on, do your research. Use capitals for accessibility. Every hashtag that I've used, I make sure I capitalize each letter. This works for screen readers. If you don't do it, it's just a bunch, it gets read aloud as a bunch of gobbledygook. So if you capitalize each letter, it gets read out by the screen reader as library book test drive. Also for accessibility, anything you put in the visuals, put it in the text underneath as well. That just is an extra tip. Have fun with it. This was one of my fun ones. Hashtag day drinking, hashtag not on work time. That was good fun. We sat on this one for about a month until we had another sunny day to post it. It felt a bit to post it on those wet days. And we included mocktails as well as cocktails in our book stack. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, the Negroni Sbagliato was delicious. Yeah, so almost at the end. I hope I've kept this in time. Please use the hashtags. Hashtags are free. Use them. Follow us on Insta at Stanton Library so we can follow you back and see where they go. Oh, ones that we've got coming up. We've got bushcraft skills, mindful mending, actually, mindful mending book. We've tied it in with our other readers advisory things. So we've got our library staff picks. So every book that gets featured gets listed on that. We've got a robotics one coming up in the future to tie in with our discovery collection, bird watching, barbecuing, plant propagation, interior design. You could think of tons more, so do it. Contact me if you want any further info. My email address is down there. Or just to let me know what you're doing. I would love to see it. And happy nonfiction reading. Thank you very much. See if I can on the screen share.
Fantastic. I'll be sure to pass our thanks along to Yasmin. That looks great. Our library work, you know, trying cocktails and eating delicious meals. That sounds fantastic. Next, we have Helen Cassidus from Burwood, who will be talking about the Midnight Library for HSC students. So thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel, and hi, everybody. Today I'm coming from Gadigal and Beadigal land, and I'm very, very happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk really, really fast, I hope. And of course, sorry guys. Okay, is that okay? Can everybody see that?
Yes, thanks, Helen.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm talking about Midnight Library. So we obviously, like all of us, our libraries, we were challenged by COVID, by the closures. We had an extra long closure because the library had closed for refurbishment for a big redevelopment. So we were trying to think of ideas and ways of how we can reach our young people. Teens are a tough crowd. They are a really, really tough crowd, actually. And so we were kind of talking about how do we support them, and then we started thinking about extending our library hours. And then that kind of just germinated more into the idea of a midnight library. So if you have a look at the photo in that shot here, that's part of the new refurbishment, and that's part of our hub space that we used for our students to study. So the plan, after nighting it out, we decided over 16s. So what was it? We did a 6-week trial, 2 nights a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 8 to midnight. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the library closes at 8 o'clock. And we just thought that that just made sense to keep it open till 12. And I don't know if anybody has been to Burwood, but we have the actual library itself, and then we have a sky bridge, and then across from that is our community hub, so we could separate the 2 areas so that nobody was in the area with the actual collections, they were just in the space. So how? That was a bit more of a challenge to kind of brainstorm. So obviously we did a risk assessment. We had to limit our numbers because of COVID. So initially it was 30, and then we bumped that up to 35 when restrictions eased. Students had to book through Try Booking. They accessed the building via a PIN. So when they would make their booking, they'd get a PIN. We hired a security guard who at the time they had to check the vaccinations and just manage kind of any behaviours or any issues with the building. So they were inducted, all that kind of stuff. Our Wi-Fi we extended to midnight. So this is something that we didn't think about was actually the cleaners. So because I think the first session they came in to clean while the students were there, so we'd asked them to come in later. Obviously we promoted through all our social media, and actually the students were our best promoters because they did it through word of mouth. And after each session we had a survey handed out. So our outcomes in the 6 weeks, it was a great success. We had 290 attendees. There was some concern from like our executive about would older people come, but you can see it's 92% were HSC students. And most of them participated in group study, and the feedback, so that's just one of the quotes, was that they just loved it and wanted more and more sessions. The issues, yeah, the Wi-Fi, it didn't always work as well as we wanted it to. People did want more seating. The group study did create noise, so you could just imagine lots of excited teams. It was vibrant, and the people that were there for individual study, they found that a bit of a challenge. And even those in the group study did also want quiet spaces as well, that they could just kind of lock away and do their work. So finally, we also, as part of this initiative, we gave away 100 care packs to our students. So the care packs included a $40 Demix voucher. And you can see from the photo, we had a large pillow-shaped packet of chips that was really, really cool. So in the pillow, there was like 10 little packets of chips. So who doesn't like junk food when they're studying, right? And so the idea of this too was to give the students a little something extra, but also in our minds, we just wanted to support local business too, because obviously they were struggling as well. And we wanted it to be like a truly kind of community initiative. We are planning on extending it this year. So having it more nights, offering it Sunday mornings. So the library opens on Sunday at 12. An idea is to open it from 9 for the students. We're hoping to have healthy snacks available, which I know is ironic given that we gave them chips and stuff. And obviously improve on the issues that we had, like the Wi-Fi and the study space. So we have some meeting rooms attached in our community hub that we plan to open up if they're not hired out for the students as well. And obviously that'll increase our numbers. And That's it. That's it. I told you I'd be quick, Rachel.
Wonderful, that was great. Where did you get those pillow packets from?
So we have like a little kind of marketplace, an Asian marketplace near the library.
Yeah.
And yeah, so one of our team just went in there to get like, I think like, I don't know, like some food for herself. And then she took photos and she was like saying to me, you have to get this. This is really cool. So yeah.
No, it's really nice that you did the care packages. I think that's, yeah. Were there?
Yeah, Duke was very happy too.
Yeah, I bet. Did you just limit it to just the HSC students, or did you find other people were trying to come in while you were open the extended hours?
No, it was too hard. So there was a lot of discussion, yeah, our executive, there was quite a lot of concern, but I don't know how you would manage that. So in the end, I was like, no, just open it to over 16s.
Yeah.
And if you were like, I guess my thinking was, if somebody was like really, really older, they perhaps would not feel comfortable in that space when they were surrounded by teenagers. Like in the end, it would kind of monitor themselves. So yeah, we didn't. I mean, most of the age was in between the 16 to the 25. So we had some uni students too, so no problem.
Yeah, great. Just one question in the chat at the moment. So were there any library staff there or only security?
Yeah, no. So we tried to do this where we would have as much as possible minimal impact on library staff, because I guess like most of us, you know, we're just not resource rich, right? So we pay people to do things for us, Rachel. So we had a security guard. Yeah.
Great. Rachel from Wagga said she loves the idea, but finding an appropriate space could pose issues.
Yeah. There was lots of discussion, but because we have the two buildings are separated by the sky bridge and then like doors, it just made it so easier. If we didn't have that space, I don't think we could do it, because you know, I don't know how you'd prefer you'd protect your collection and your computers and all of that. It would be quite a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Shazia from Bankstown said they've been doing the same thing for a few years now. They've just not provided, I just haven't done the $40 vouchers. However, they said they do have teachers for subjects like English and legal studies. So it's a nice to do for our HSC kids.
Yeah, anything that brings it back to literacy and to reading. We're always trying to sneakily kind of do things like that. Yeah, and look, you know, to have 290 kids, I mean, it was just an amazing experience. And like the students, the community tells you how they want to use the space because they're always there and they're studying. So it was kind of a no-brainer. Yeah, they were very appreciative.
Great. Thank you very much, Ellen.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Today. Thank you. Our last 5-minute speaker is Ellen, who'll be talking about our statewide sessions for reference excellence training.
Hello, I'm just showing my screen, so hopefully you can see the Reference Excellence Wiki. This is a month-by-month program that you can do at your own pace, or you can join other people in discussing a module at a time each month. Tomorrow, we're actually up to module 2, so we'll be talking with people about that. What these modules do is take you through reference training, and it works well as both a refresher and good for new staff as well. And you can come in, participate in some of the modules or all of them. There's a link to book here. That's mainly so we know how many people to kind of ballpark expect. And we'll be running a small group discussion. So last time we had 3 breakout rooms for people to talk in the more detail around it, so you're not talking in a big group. So please come along. The links to book are here. and you can see each of the modules that as they're coming up. You can participate in one or all, and so come along, try it out. You do need to, you are strongly encouraged, I should say, to work your way through the module beforehand, and then we'll be discussing any issues that come up and how you answered the questions and ideas that are triggered. It actually would align well with some of the presentations we've been listening to today. Please get in touch if you have any questions about it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ellen. Any questions? Someone's asked, I don't know if that's for you, Ellen, or the talk before need to book, but yeah, there were links to book. Yeah, Ellen, do you mind just showing again where you book?
I've also just put it in chat so that there's the link there, but I'll show on the screen as well briefly. So to book, it's under the link to book for online training, and it's a module at the time. So there's a link to book for each session. Because we figured there's a link to book for each session, because that way you're not booking for all or you're not booking for none. And there are some people who've already booked their way through all of the sessions. It could be viewed as a way to help motivate you to complete various things, but feel free to come for one, all, etc. Well, you can't come for all unless you've already been to the first one. But yes, come along to the future ones. We're not videoing them because they're really about discussion, not recording the information for other people.
Great, thanks for showing that again. No one, any more questions? I think that's it for now. So on to our last topic for today. Michelle's joined us again. We were going to just do a little call out for additional committee members for our steering group. So at the moment it's Michelle, Ellen and myself. So if anyone's interested in joining, it's great fun. You get to talk to lots of interesting people. If you're interested, Ellen, do they just contact you?
Or either of you two?
Yep.
But yes, I'm happy if people email me, and you've probably got my email somewhere in your inbox.
Yeah. And it's not onerous to be part of the working party. What did we have to do this year? Just organize, we only had to organize this session, the seminar. What else do we do? Not much else.
No.
We haven't had working group meetings for a few years, so there would be the option of reintroducing working group meetings if there were more volunteers.
So please join us.
Yes, or if you've got ideas for future speakers for future seminars, please let us know. Or if you do something you'd like to talk about for 5 minutes or less, let us know.
And I will be sending an evaluation out about that as well, so you can suggest in there, but you can also directly contact Rachel and Michelle with suggestions too.
Great, well that's it for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. Feel free to pop any comments